Chapter 201. Crack. Crackik. The things that led Yasuo to know that the land is of Dawn Freak's creation finally started moving, as the deafening sound of their movement reverberated through the expanse and created massive sonic bombs by their sheer scale and movement speed. What lied before his eyes are what appear to be three great exquisite statues. The statues were so colossal. They could be seen from tens of miles away, leaving little to the imagination of what inhabits the crimson expanse. They were kneeling no more as they stood at nearly a mile in height, each with the same exact height and form. Even the numerous patterns decorating them were the same. They were truly a work of art, perfected to a minuscule level. The cracks beneath their feet were much more evident as they spread vastly around them. The sheer pressure of them standing up was enough to expand those cracks even more. The butterflies that were within the vicinity of them seemed to know what's about to come as they nimbly flew away. The statues seemed old, extremely so. There was no fracture or damage on them. They would have looked new if not for the massive amounts of grass growing on them. In the vast desolated crimson expanse where not even a speck of grass, plants, or trees growing anywhere, one can find two of the previous flourishing on the statues that rarely moves. The frail of the grass and plants fell to their death as the statues stood up. Their speed was just that astronomical. Their massive size and the gravity acting on them didn't seem to be a problem for them as they moved smoothly and fluidly. Every step they took shattered the ground. One could even assume it could shiver the firmaments. However, a step is all they needed as the three colossal statues appeared surrounding Yasuo, looking down at him as he's but a mere ant. Their original color seemed to be metallic like blue, but all that was left is hints of it as the crimson dominating the land sought them as well. That mixture painted a beautiful but peculiar picture of three mostly crimson statues with a hint of blue and green over them. That beautiful picture seemed terrifying as the tree statues started their heaven-destroying attacks. One simply took a step seeking to squash the feeble human before him. Another lifted his hand high in the sky and performed a chopping motion trying to evaporate the uninvited intruder from existence. The last also didn't want to lose as he tightly squeezed his metallic hand before performing a space-shattering punch. Yasuo was amusedly watching the scene. To him, it seemed more like a competition for who can perform their duty better and faster. To them, it was a competition of who can send the intruder off first and satisfy their master. Whether the intruder was a sentient species, human, or an animal mattered not to them. Good and bad weren't in their dictionary. An intruder simply means an intruder in their book. And food for the land. Their speed was truly astronomical, surpassing most of the things Yasuo had faced so far. He knew the moment he laid eyes on them of their power. The exquisite and never-seen-before patterns on them are what made it possible. The patterns that would look to most people as useless decoration looked to Yasuo like fabulous and complex inscriptions that could only be made by God or someone who had lots of time. By lots of time, Yasuo means thousands to tens of thousands of years, that or an ability that can make the process faster and easier. Their attacks traveled through time and space, surpassing the super-hypersonic speed by far, yet Yasuo just smiled. And disappeared. His control domain had long surpassed miles in range, and he is quickly approaching what he had achieved back when he had activated his department collector ability. So he naturally found it extremely easy to set his feet on the top of one of the statues, instantly. His space control is also improving and evolving as his inscribed genes evolved as well, as the patterns he personally designed were turning, accelerating, and optimizing the evolution process. He stood tall and mighty above the statue. This time, he was looking down on them instead of the opposite. However, that wasn't what he was thinking about or even cared for. At that moment, his mind was overwhelmed with a wave holding the entire ocean within, a wave of curiosity, dearly seeking freedom. He naturally unleashed it as he crouched and gently touched the statue's metallic head, a small part of it, akin to a tiny bug making contact with the indestructible scales of a dragon. I see, the land is the way it is because of the three statues and what they're guarding, specifically, the material they're made of. I explored a significant portion of the Dark Continent, and I'm sure I didn't miss anything, yet this is the first time I see such material. However, it doesn't seem rare at all. The three statues are composed of that same material solely. So either he explored the entire continent and took it all, or he got it from somewhere else, and there are only two places I can think of where such material could exist: outside and inside. He was in deep rumination, completely ignoring the three horrifying statues as they changed their target of attacks towards their comrade's head, paying no heed to his safety. However, their comrade was the same as he himself, targeted his head with a slap, seemingly an annoyed human wanting to squash a mosquito. Most people know how annoying that is, and they also know of something even more annoying. How hard it is to kill the fucking bug. Against the incoming hands of hell, all Yasuo had to do is disappear at the last second before the impact, right before the colossal hand came in contact with his hair. The first hand, which belongs to the statue Yasuo's mounting, landed, creating a thundering sonic bomb among the many made with their abrupt scale and speed. The sonic bombs generated by them were so heavenly they echoed for miles to tens of miles around, affecting that fragile life populating the Ruby land just as one might imagine. What followed that hand is another hand landing on top of it, just to make sure the bug is no more. The statues appeared to be quite cautious because a third hand followed closely after. The impact of such an act threatened to shake the entire planet, creating havoc within. Yet, the statue's head remained intact, appearing to be indestructible. However, the statues weren't happy. You know what they say, just when you think you got it, you hear and feel the buzzing sound as the mosquito lands on your sensitive skin, seeking to devour every drop of your blood. In this case, one of the statues felt Yasuo land on their sensitive metallic skin, but he wasn't interested in devouring their blood, for they have none. Well, there is the ancient solid blood all over them, but it isn't their blood, it's the blood of their victims. Yasuo wasn't interested in such a thing. He was just curious. The bizarre expanse and the peculiar statues piqued his interest, so his researcher instinct kicked in. The statues had a hard time perceiving his next actions, as before they knew it, a large purple sphere of pure destructive aura emerged on his hand. Encircling the sphere is what looks like an even more dangerous aura, dark lightning-like aura rumbling around it. No need for haste, then his faint words resounded throughout the Crimson Land. I will thoroughly research each of you, so be patient. His hand, adorned by bright purple lines, went through the statue as he uttered those words. Instantly after that, those same purple lines disappeared from his hand and instead spread all over the statue. Nothing happened for a second or so, though strangely, the statue remained frozen in its place before its whole body started deforming as if it's on the brink of disintegrating. However, the red matter all over the statue started to act as it exited its solid state and instantly started bringing all of its parts back together down to the molecular level. It was like a sticky fluid bent on keeping the statue just as exquisite as it was, seemingly afraid of such work of art fading from existence. I see. He used the material's applications as a base to build something miraculous. The material was already magical, yet he wasn't satisfied and turned it into something more, into a divine substance. Yasuo then laid his eyes on the ground far below, knowing full well what lies hidden deep beneath it, the fuel of the statues. The element's magicalness and the existence of the thing below is what allowed for the land to be the way it is today. Just like the Brian's creatures only came to be because of what lies beneath existence. Affecting reality without meaning to. Oh well, after a second of contemplation, Yasuo shrugged his shoulder and set his eyes upon the fully recovered statue. Might as well try a few things on you. Yasuo then closed his eyes, seemingly ignoring the colossal punches heading his way, and gently uttered a few words. A devouring jungle from the left. Darkness from the right. Ominous light of misfortune at the front. Fire of hell behind. His words resembled some kind of incantation because after his every word, reality becomes twisted as they come true. Yet, I'm not done just yet. Chapter 202. Yasuo then closed his eyes, seemingly ignoring the colossal punches heading his way, and gently uttered a few words. A devouring jungle from the left. Darkness from the right. Ominous light of misfortune at the front. Fire of hell behind. His words resembled some kind of incantation because after his every word, reality becomes twisted as they come true. Yet, I'm not done just yet. Instantly after that, 3 purple threads formed from his back and from them spurted a faint form. Until the form became completely apparent as it showed itself painted with a bright purple color. Its size was rivaling that of the statues as it gazed upon them with its inky vertical eyes. This is the vision form. Its 6 colossal arms were so large they were capable of grasping the world whole, or at least, that's the illusion it gives. However, Yasuo didn't use it to attack. Instead, the 6 arms encompassed him, acting as an indestructible shield of sorts. Yasuo remained wary, especially after he felt a faint sense of danger spurting in them, and after Medusa appeared cautiously looking at them. This was after all part of his research, and he needs them to be fully functional and performing their duty to see what they can really do. So erasing them directly is out of the question. However, his words, which seemed to have distorted reality and formed what could be called the 4 great calamities, have the power to erase them directly. As his words stated, a green jungle started growing to the left of the statues. It was growing way too quickly. A jungle full of life, as anything that came in contact with it fell to their death only to stand strong again as a sphere appeared on their heads. All the life the jungle could consume is the blood butterflies, as the parasite-like sphere appeared in place of their small heads. Everything that comes in contact with the jungle becomes one with it as it quickly growing. It quickly formed into a colossal statue formed solely by the massive trunks and branches of life as well as the wildlife of the jungle. A parasite-like entity seeking to even infect the 3 great statues, strangely similar to the shape of the Bryans. From their right, a massive wave of dark gas showed itself, appearing to be harmless if not for anything that comes in contact with it simply vanishing within its darkness. Hell manifested behind them in the shape of fiendish flames, seeking to evaporate all that's before it. The flame appeared to be capable of even burning and distorting space around it. Time had no place in its heat. An extremely small ball of light manifested in front of Yasuo directly facing the statues. Its light shone upon the world with a wholly warm light, but only the wisest and strongest would notice its true form. Ominousness and vileness hid deep with the light. Its attacking power was negligible, but its effect can bring dread to even the mightiest of beings. These are all abilities he mimicked. His engraved genes allowed for the mimicking process to evolve, and become much faster and more efficient. So he didn't find it hard to mimic the ability of his black dragon. He already mimicked Phaeton's ability long ago, and the addition of the old granny's ability made the flames he can create much stronger. As for the Bryan's natural ability, he strangely found it easy to mimic as his genes started to produce those same parasitical particles with absolute control over them as long as they are within his domain. The most interesting ability, however, is that bright spherical light shining upon the land. It isn't just one ability, no, it's the combination of 2 astonishing abilities. The misfortune ability of Periston and the luck factor ability of Zig, which has allowed the Zoldyck family to survive as it is despite the circumstances. Yasuo's naming sense is quite uncreative as he doesn't give it much thought, so he called the resulting ball of light, the light of misfortune. That pure light spread throughout the crimson light, bringing holiness to all. The life within, however, disagreed as a series of minuscule unlucky events happened around. It decreased the invisible variable called luck for his opponents. Luck is an illusionary concept which Yasuo tends to avoid relying on. Yasuo also knows that every concept he can control with his domain is illusionary, and by controlling those concepts, he is breaking the already established rules of the universe. His control domain doesn't make any sense, at least in the standards of normal people, but since he knows of Nen, the impossible became possible. He tended to avoid relying on luck simply because it's a variable outside of his control, but now, it's entering the vast range of his domain. This is another concept he started to gain control over as his control domain started branching out. His abilities are evolving, and that especially applies to his control domain as it worked together flawlessly with his genes to make controlling other variables possible. His genes evolve based on other genes and other beings' Nen, and that process helps in mimicking those creatures' abilities. This in turn leads to gaining familiarity with the said ability, especially for his domain as the latter is completely integrated into him, so anything he becomes familiar with, his domain becomes familiar with. That means he can sense other illusionary concepts, thus controlling them. They become within the range of his domain, and Yasuo found that controlling concepts is significantly easier than manipulating things in their pure form. That applies to things that exist in our reality but also exist as a concept. A simple example would be controlling fire, provided the fire isn't the result of his transmutation, meaning he has no natural control over it, and excluding his new fire commanding ability. In that case, controlling fire would be convoluted as he'll need to accurately manipulate it while keeping his sense focused on it. He either has to control each individual particle or finding a way around it and compress the air around it before moving it around or other similar processes. That way is of course quite focus and energy consuming. But if he controlled fire as a concept, the process will feel natural and fluid, akin to a general designing a strategy, and the soldiers performing it perfectly. Just like how he's controlling those flames currently. It was as if his domain is a wire which transmits comprehensible signals between his brain and the fire. This is but an experiment, as Yasuo knows full well that the light of misfortune shines most with time. For a prominent impact, the ability will need time, only then can the target truly feel what being unlucky feels like, and it's even harder against opponents as mighty as the statues. That's why he experimented with the ability a lot until he came up with a solution, focusing all the unluckiness into a small ball only on one target. That small insignificant ball of light takes time to create, and he has been working on it for quite a while now. He only teleported it here once he found a perfect specimen he can try it on, just like he created the darkness and fire long before and teleported them directly to the desired location. Yasuo kept his focus entirely on the statues as they all focused on him who appeared to be hidden within the 6 purple hands. Yasuo was looking at them through the inky vertical eyes of the vision construct as one of the statues took a step forward before a strange thing happened. Yasuo could hear a faint illusionary voice that reverberated through the land and beyond. The peculiar voice seemed to come from the statue, however, it felt like it's coming from their core as their mouths remained tightly shut. Most importantly, the voice felt human. Yasuo felt as if the voice has traveled through time to utter those simple words. Cylinder of rising force. A calm and wise voice murmured those words as a tranquil dimly lit cylinder appeared in front of the statue's chest. The transparent cylinder seemed to be the representation of calmness and tranquility, and most importantly, of patience. The vibe of it was utterly strange, but anyone who lay his eyes on it would feel like their will and patience is insignificant. The moment Yasuo laid his eyes upon the miraculous cylinder, he discerned quite a few things and knew that its creator's patience isn't something he can understand currently. The cylinder was launched as fast as it appeared. In contrast to its name, its momentum and velocity didn't rise at all. There was no acceleration, for it was launched at its absolute max speed instantly. That'll only appear incomprehensible once one perceived that absolute speed. Yasuo certainly didn't. He who was able to slightly react to the speed of light wasn't able to perceive a single thing regarding the cylinder's movement. It just appeared, then it started moving, then he was obliterated into literal nothingness. Against Miriam, he was able to perceive a few of the latter's movements with his domain, and it was largely due to the latter which made instantaneous transfer of information possible. He was able to slightly react to Miriam's movement, but he was far off from being able to actually escape Light's clutches. But he at least knew he can use his teleportation to counter Miriam's light speed, even if it comes with a risk, so, in the end, he had to use his vision eye to win against him. That near-instantaneous transfer of information and reaction proved to be utterly useless against the cylinder because it surpassed the speed of light by far. Chapter 203. That near-instantaneous transfer of information and reaction proved to be utterly useless against the cylinder because it surpassed the speed of light by far. So many questions and doubts spurted in Yasuo's mind as time started rewinding itself back until he appeared floating in the middle of the air. The scene changed with the vision construct still floating above him before those now chilling words were even uttered and that strange force was released. The Cylinder of Rising Force, what a strange name, thought Yasuo as he entered a state of deep contemplation. He completely ignored the statues that are still attacking him, though they didn't feel the need to use their greatest move yet, the last measure executed solely in desperate and hopeless circumstances. They were only forced to use it after sensing the danger of his power and the four heaven-erasing forces he manifested previously. In contrast, now he just summoned his vision construct looking harmless, and considering the price for manifesting the cylinder, they'd prefer not to use it. The cylinder the statue summoned is quite small, not much bigger than my size. After questions and doubts come conclusions, answers, and theories. So numerous possibilities and conclusions started surfacing in his mind. The possibility of this power being related to the cylinder-like crater I found back then is quite high. In fact, I'm pretty sure Dawn is responsible for it. Memories of the time he explored the cylinder-like crater started coming back to him as dived deeply into them. He was remembering the great abyss that's the massive crater, so deep it seemed to be infinite, seemingly leading to the depths of unknown darkness. It took him time to traverse the entire cylinder crater even with his domain and space control. The cylinder abyss was just that tremendous, hundreds of thousands of miles deep and continent-size wide. It's truly horrifying to even imagine something capable of creating such a spectacle. The Cylinder of Rising Force seemed almost completely holy while the crater reeked of vileness and ominousness. So the thing responsible for that sinister aura was his opponent. Yasuo wasn't surprised by Dawn being responsible for the cylinder abyss in the least, nor was he surprised by him having the power to create such a spectacle. Yasuo might need a bit of time, but he can do the same without much trouble except for the horrifying consumption. What fascinated him is the cylinder's power and infinite possibility. What truly astonished him is the possibilities opened by the simple existence of that ability. The unimaginable but possible interpretations of the past were truly fascinating. The curtain of the hidden past and ancient glorious history is starting to unveil itself before his eyes. Yasuo's judgment in such things is incredibly precise and indisputable, so when he judged that the cylinder actually moves at a speed surpassing light's by far, he barely doubted his judgment. His sense in that moment of life and death was magnified to a degree beyond anything he had ever experienced, so as he sensed with his domain, there was no movement in space. The cylinder was simply ignoring the laws of physics and surpassed the speed of light by what he judged to be a significant amount. The cylinder went against anything thought to be possible in the world of science. Moving at the speed of light is already judged to be impossible no matter what. As for surpassing it? Well, is there anything beyond the impossible? Surpassing that speed means the possibility of traveling through time to the past is a possibility. Nearing the speed of light or moving at its exact speed permits time travel, but just to the future. Traveling to the future is not hard as people are experiencing it all the time. Everything that's moving is also subsequently moving through time, but it's to a negligible amount. We at least have airplanes and satellites as an example, as we know the clocks within move differently to our planet. Yet, here is an ability able to break that rule. There are just too many restrictions on moving above the speed of light, yet none of them seem to be an obstacle for the cylinder. It seemed as if it didn't exist, as the air particles didn't move due to its movement. It was as if the cylinder doesn't exist or has no effect on the world, except for when it obliterated Yasuo and the vision construct protecting him. It also strangely didn't seem to move through time. When anything moves at that speed, that thing won't have a choice but bow down to the rules and go back in time. However, the cylinder seemed to have Yasuo as its destination, no matter the time or space limitations. Cylinder of rising force, what does this name tell me? Thought Yasuo as he raised his hands ready to start experimenting, with caution apparent in his eyes. A cloud of darkness started forming in his hands, continuously in the process of compressing into a small ball. That dark fog seemed to alert the statues of its utter unimaginable danger as they again sought to manifest the cylinder. Yasuo didn't seem to want to give them any time, perhaps knowing of his fate upon the manifestation of the cylinder. So he directly released the dark fog sphere into the statues. This time, instead of surrounding the statues with his power and teleporting the fog a bit away from them, he controlled the fog to split into 3 parts before teleporting them directly inside of the statues. The dark fog was once able to completely melt a significant portion of his body and even melt his exoskeleton, a testament to its utter horrifying power. In his hand, that power became much more horrific, bringing despair to anyone experiencing it if they have time to even comprehend what's happening. It was as if time stopped as the dark fog appeared directly in their core, unable to hide from Yasuo's unstoppable domain. The dark substance was like an extremely contagious virus spreading throughout the statues, and leaving nothing behind. The statues simply evaporated from the face of the planet, leaving not even a single particle behind. However, they did leave behind a gift for Yasuo. They left 3 faint cylinders floating within the darkness as if they don't even exist. The dark fog, capable of erasing or at least corroding even the most unbreakable of things, didn't seem to be able to even touch the cylinders, seemingly intangible. Strangely, Yasuo wasn't fazed one bit. Instead, he retracted his vision construct with a dark purple crow appearing on his shoulders. He even manipulated his nen back, providing little to no protection to his body as he just waited for the cylinders to act. He didn't have to wait at all, as he was instantly erased by one of the 3 cylinders. Time started getting distorted again as he appeared in the same location with the vision construct still up and the statues still completely intact. Yet, he didn't get to rejoice his vibrant life for even a moment, for he was erased from existence. Again. The same scene happened again as time reminded itself until he again appeared intact, and again, the same thing repeated itself as he was deleted from reality. I'm glad. I'm extremely pleased with myself for creating such an ability, else, everything would be much harder, and performing my current research and experiments would be a bit too annoying. Thought Yasuo as he opened his eyes, finding himself gazing at the view of the statues just standing up. He found himself floating in the air just as the statues exited their kneeling position and stood up ready to handle the unwanted visitor. I see, the cylinder needs a target, and they will reach that target as long as their power allows them to. They can ignore reality and move through time with the exact speed needed to reach me. I, who was experiencing a future that didn't actually happen, suffered repercussions from that future. I didn't escape from the cylinder's field of play. Yasuo ignored everything else as he dived into his own thoughts with his scarlet eyes shining more than ever. A faint smile of marvel slowly surfaced on his pale face. Something is going to be dissected. Well, my vision ability is not absolute. I already knew that, as this is the second case of my ability not working properly. The God of Choice was after all able to talk to me, even though I was only looking into the past and don't actually exist in that past. The first cylinder that erased him is of course the same one he was looking at, one of the 3 cylinders. The second was the same, it was one of the remaining 2, and the same for the last. They traveled through time and realities to reach him and delete his very existence. So, in that negligible amount of time it took them to erase him, there existed another cylinder in that current timeline aside from the 3 within the intact statues. With the same disturbing smile still hanging on his face, Yasuo lifted his hand on which a sphere of holy light appeared. "It took me a long time to create you, and no matter how much I see what you can do, it never ceases to amaze me. Your very existence and how you work makes little to no sense." The disturbing smile was more than enough to signify what's to come as he released the harmless sphere of light into the air. It was but an instant before it appeared next to the statues, looking just as harmless, pure even. Its radiance shone upon the land, especially focused on the statues. The holy light sought to bring even more life and security to the bloody expanse. Everything and everyone bathing in its warm glow would never wish to leave, converting into a slave of that sinless light. However, what that sacred radiance caused is nothing if not pure darkness. Yeah, no matter how much I see such similar scenes, you never make much sense. Unless a variable exists. Chapter 204. However, what that sacred radiance caused is nothing if not pure darkness. Yeah, no matter how much I see such similar scenes, you never make much sense. Unless a variable exists. His vision ability is too convenient, and it allowed him to see similar scenes to the spectacle before him many times before. The scene of reality getting distorted under the sphere's ominous light. It was as if the fabric of space and time were getting twisted. The ominous light was simply the accumulation of an insane amount of Yasuo's aura over time. Well, it's not just his pure aura, since it was transmuted into the sinister light it is today, the light of misfortune. He was accumulating and compressing that small sphere of light for months, and with his Nen capacity, one can only imagine what it's capable of. Or just observe the scene before Yasuo's radiant eyes. The spectacle of the statue and the crimson expanse's very roots and destiny getting bent under the unimaginable amounts of misfortune shining upon them. After all, misfortune and fortune are a part of the great power called destiny or fate, and a concentration big enough of either of them will affect the very fabric of reality. Though Yasuo avoided using that power on himself due to various reasons, the most important one being it's not completely under his control. Specifically, the concept of destiny is still far from being under his grip. It's actually one of the vaguest concepts Yasuo knows of, and it's been bugging his mind for quite a while. It's a power that can affect reality and every other concept in the universe. It's a concept Yasuo can see, or at least, see its effect on the world. By sensing the concepts of fortune and misfortune, he can see those strings spreading throughout the world, akin to a tree branching out infinitely, albeit slowly. To Yasuo, it seems as if there is a barrier standing before those branches, not halting the process of branching out but slowing it down. It was as if destiny was seeking to consume the whole world dry using those concepts as a conduit, and Yasuo is using that conduit to affect reality. That power was affecting their very existence and creation, seemingly manipulating certain events in the past, leading to them never existing in the first place. The distortion of reality was starting to calm down. However, what that entails is a change in reality and the unexistence of the statues and the expanse. The change of reality happens instantly, meaning everything will change in the blink of an eye. However, something or someone doesn't seem to wish for that to happen, as another voice reverberated throughout the expanse, again. It was the same voice Yasuo heard before, and knowing the owner of the voice's power and ability, this was within the realm of possibilities. Cylindrical bullets of patience. They will always reach their target, one just needs to be patient. The calm voice traveled through time to reach him like all the small faint bullets that suddenly appeared out of nowhere. Their source didn't seem to be the statues but something else from somewhere far away, perhaps from the past or the future. In a certain timeline, someone sensed the disorder in reality and its potential effects, so he sought to stop it, and his ability happened to allow him to reach his target, ignoring all obstacles, even time. His words might sound more like a mockery than an incantation. How can someone not have the patience to wait for the bullets to reach their target? It's simply impossible. The bullets traveled through time and space and reached Yasuo instantly before tearing him to shreds. The bullets were incredibly small, but their numbers and combined power seemed to be even capable of tearing the whole world apart. Yet even with the numerous bullets tearing him apart, he was still standing there intact, as that was but a mere vision of his. After a cylinder hits the target, it disappears. That seems to be a condition of the ability, so all the faint bullets that hit Yasuo had disappeared. Yet, numerous other bullets still remained in the future he saw, and they broke through reality and common sense just to reach him and again tear him to shreds. No matter how much Yasuo persisted and continued trying to evade them, they always appear before him and erase him. He was continuously looking into the future and changing his location accordingly to avoid them, yet, the results are always the same. He was their target, and they were able to follow him everywhere, to the depths of hell and even to the heights of heaven. He acts according to their movement to evade them, but they also act accordingly as well, and they're much faster than him, so no matter what he does, the bullets are always numerous steps ahead of him. It was a hopeless endeavor. In fact, it was almost completely impossible to even use his vision eye at this point. So one has to wonder, how is he still alive? The bullets can follow him through time and erase him, and they did so numerous times, yet, it's always just his vision eye form. Well, while he can't do this when looking into the past, when looking into the future, he can still use his vision eye in that future. So technically, he can infinitely look into the future through the future he's seen, and that's exactly what he did. The bullets can only kill him once they reach his original form, his real form, which exists in contrast to the future he sees, but to do that, they need to reach it. The Yasuo they follow is the one in control, the one that actually exists at a certain point in time. Aside from the Yasuo in control, every other version of him could be considered non-existent, even his original form, which means at a point of time and space, only one Yasuo exists. When he activates his vision eye, time halts for the original form and starts in the future he's seeing, or he simply sees that future instantly. The cylinders need a viable timeline to travel to where he actually exists, so they will never be able to ignore it and travel directly to his original form. The only risk left for Yasuo is for how much can he hold on. How deep in his vision ability he currently is? He tried everything to fight death and used many of his ability, but little of them worked against such monstrous force. He always dies. Even his portal's ability, which can grant him minor invulnerability, wasn't able to stop the cylinders. They didn't seem to exist in space and seemed to move in a different dimension to attain their target. Yet, Yasuo's expression remained unchanged through death and blood. True death didn't faze him at all. He continued to fight against it and working ways he can stop them in his mind or erase them. Most importantly, he was trying to react to them and sense them more clearly. He was training in the midst of adversity and torture, something he's used to from his early days in this world. His genes seemed to have sensed the danger and his agony and started accelerating his infinite evolution, especially focusing on his brain and soul. That shouldn't be possible, since anything that happens in the future he sees doesn't affect his original form except for the additional information of that future. Yet, he truly felt himself evolving across all the timelines, ignoring time limitations. His soul was ascending to a higher stage and his brain was changing with it, going as far as affect the very fabric of reality itself. The process continued for what could be estimated to be nearly an hour, and with the speed of the two monstrous forces, it's too long of a time. His domain reached an unparalleled height by the end, transcending even his previous record after using his debt collector ability. All of this was happening while his mind was working on something else. He was calculating all the variables with his evolved mind, going beyond what's humanly imaginable. He was also using his vision eye's ability again whenever he can, and though it didn't help much, it led to an interesting conclusion. Yasuo's original form, with his shining scarlet eyes looking directly at the faint cylindrical bullet targeting his heart. Just like always, he wasn't able to stop it, nor did he try to. He allowed the last cylinder to go through his chest, his exoskeleton, then his heart before disappearing after exiting his back. An ability that perhaps wasn't strong at the start but has grown with him to become what it is today, and can possibly go further, much further. Those were Yasuo's calm words as the fatal wound on his chest closed fully, and almost instantly. A smile surfaced on his face as he added, "It sounds familiar. My control domain was nowhere near as remarkable as it is today, and I could do little back then with it." A smirk followed directly after. Satisfaction was apparent in his eyes. "Now, even reality is near my grasp. Time and space are under my control. My sense within my absolute domain is unrivaled. That sense with the combination of few other things allowed me to manipulate reality indirectly and direct the odds to my favor." Yasuo then lightly touched his now spotless skin, the wound nowhere to be seen or even left a mark of its existence. He sensed the remnants of that force only for his smirk to grow. "I succeeded in directing one bullet to this timeline, and here I am satisfied, with my desires in hand." He gently lifted his hand as a small strand of Nen left it, but never left his control, and under that control, that energy shaped itself in the shape of a cylinder as a few more words left his mouth. "I just need time. Time to mimic it." Chapter 205. He gently lifted his hand as a small strand of Nen left it, but never left his control, and under that control, that energy shaped itself in the shape of a cylinder as a few more words left his mouth. "I just need time. Time to mimic it." He closed his eyes for a second before letting out a breath of fresh air. Then he remarked as he stood on the brink of setting foot in the Crimson Land, "It's good to be cautious." His vision eye ability has been activated before he even entered the Crimson Land. After all, one can never be too cautious, so activated his vision eyes numerous times, going deeper and deeper into the future. He could see the statues from far away. His arrow eye threads made sure of that, and to a certain extent, he sensed their danger. However, what made him even more cautious is how dearly Medusa wishes to go out and protect him. She can sense danger and misfortune looming over him even more than him, and her cautiousness was inherited from him. It's a natural ability of Medusa, and could even be said to be foresight, for no danger can escape her numerous eyes, else how can she perform her duty to the standard Yasuo had set for himself? Of course, he didn't allow her to interfere unless that danger reaches his original form. Only in that case can she use their power to erase that danger, or even use his last and final measure if necessary. Time, he must have had plenty of it to achieve that level of power, contemplated Yasuo, thinking back to the hellish force the cylinders were. They were an absolute nightmare for even the mightiest of beings, even to him. There were very few things he can do against them, especially considering what he faced was nowhere near the real deal. The creator of the cylinders never appeared, yet his mere shadow left Yasuo with no means of resistance, helpless. So how old is he really? According to what I know, he should be a bit older than 300 years, but his ability, which can travel through time, changes everything. Yasuo frowned, thinking about the implications of such a thing, yet, he wasn't able to change much. If my theory is correct, then he must have traveled back in time to a point in time in which humanity was flourishing and in complete control of the Dark Continent. Perhaps he wanted to save humanity from extinction, or he wanted to stop whatever was threatening humanity, yet he failed. So, what kind of being was able to do all of that, ignoring Dawn's interference? Or perhaps, Dawn was able to change something. Perhaps, he was able to save humanity from extinction. He was even responsible for the existence of humans in the known world. Yasuo frowned even more as numerous possibilities surfaced in his mind, most contradict each other, leading to a convoluted mess. However, that doesn't make much sense. There always needs to be a beginning for something to happen. Dawn being the one responsible for his own existence makes little to no sense. Humanity existing in the known world because of him means he is responsible for changing history, but there needs to be a first Dawn for that to be possible. The grandfather paradox makes this possibility impossible, as it's, to a certain extent, the same paradox. a potential logical problem that would arise if a person were to travel to a past time. The name comes from the idea that if a person travels to a time before their grandfather had children, and kills him, it would make their own birth impossible. Yasuo finally set foot on the crimson expanse again. He started slowly walking towards the statues, no giving up or even feeling like he needs to. Meeting either Dawn or his enemy now sounds like a stupid idea, as they both have access to time and can possibly reach me. Also, I don't want to use my last measure until later when the percentage accumulates to a satisfying degree, but in due time, I shall meet them. For now, I am satisfied with the toys before me, and there is a lot of research and exploration to be done. Since he already went through the minuscule trouble of coming here, he of course won't leave empty-handed. The statues and what lies within were never an obstacle for Yasuo, but their master was a bit of a problem. However, their master doesn't seem interested in interfering unless Yasuo took things too far as he did previously. Using his vision eye to get rid of the cylinders will prove to be useless. He knows if the cylinder did what they were supposed to and erased him, they will disappear. That means if the cylinders erase the him of the future, they will disappear, but that doesn't matter because the ones in the present he exists and will still exist, and only the future ones will disappear. However, Yasuo doesn't need to endanger the statues to the point of activating the cylinder hidden inside their core. He just needs a portion of the material they're composed of and takes a closer look at what they're guarding. So, as he was walking towards them, closer and closer, an interesting phenomenon was happening to his pale body. It appeared as if his body was blending with the environment, slowly but surely merging with the world until he disappeared completely. Perfect plan. Melioron's ability was under effect, hiding his very existence from fate itself, and only then did he start teleporting towards his goals. Until he set foot at the exact center between all the kneeling giants. Yasuo was looking down at what's beneath his feet, what lies in eternal slumber beneath the ground. Numerous coffins buried deep beneath the ground. All the coffins were in the shape of a cylinder, and what lies within didn't escape Yasuo's gaze. No obstacle can stop his domain. Human remnants lie within every coffin. Corroded remains, not by time but by something else. Yasuo could see something protecting the coffins. He could see a faint layer of energy surrounding in the same shape, a cylinder. He knows exactly what that faint layer is, he was killed by it countless times after all. That should explain his surprise and astonishment as his domain picked the insane amounts of slumbering cylinders beneath the ground. Their only duty was to protect the coffins, and they had no interest in interfering with anything else, or at least, that's how it appears. Yasuo on the other hand sensed something else. His magnificent domain was able to sense those faint hidden snakes within the coffins, hiding inside the very bones of the dead. Perhaps a snake isn't an accurate description because they were but an inky thread of energy that looks harmless, if not for the ominous vibe around it. They were millions of such black snake inside each coffin, and they were millions of such coffins. They were deeply hidden in their bones and flesh. Portions of the human's flesh strangely survived through the ages. The timeline of the events within Yasuo's mind was extremely convoluted. He isn't sure how long ago was the Great Calamity, and he knows very little of that ancient past. However, he does know that it happened at least thousands ago, and it's very likely it was tens of thousands ago. The dark snakes were responsible for such an astounding phenomenon. The humans within are their prey. Their flesh is the parasite's food, so how can they allow it to be consumed by something else? Even time. Another thing he noticed is the fact that the human's remains are moving, akin to a zombie. Not even death was an obstacle to them. Well, it was an obstacle for the dead humans because they're actually dead. The intruder within is responsible. All of this information made it obvious to Yasuo that the cylinder wasn't made to protect what's within from the outside, it was made to protect the world from what's inside. It's a calamity waiting to be unleashed from its seal, and bring darkness to the world. Interesting and horrifying at the same time, thought Yasuo, with his Yasuo gleaming with a bright light. Those little harmless things were almost able to exterminate humanity whole. However, that's not all. Yasuo was sensing another peculiarity about the remains. They were deformed and disfigured, and it appears to be natural. Not just one of the bodies, but each and every one of them. A smile of interest surfaced on his face as he turned around after coming to an interesting conclusion, that looks strikingly similar. My lab once had bodies that look quite similar. Perhaps. Yasuo then lifted his hand and brought them close to each other before pulling something apart. His hands instantly appeared far from each other as the invisible strings were pulled apart. What followed is one of the statue's legs being cut cleanly and disappearing with Yasuo before the statues even had a chance to react. His space control has taken him far beyond the crimson expanse in the blink of an eye. The inscriptions on the statues were already deeply engraved in his mind. Each nook and cranny were studied thoroughly by Yasuo in futures that didn't happen. Yasuo faded into the distance, preparing to enter another long session of research with one last thought in his mind: if I cook part of the statue's leg with Shensi's pot, will I be able to gain more information about it? Chapter 206. Time is an illusion. Our naive perception of its flow doesn't correspond to physical reality. Reality is just a complex network of events onto which we project sequences of past, present, and future. However, time is still a concept we humans defined and know of. That was all that's needed for the people with power to make use of it. The concept of Nen, which certainly exists, allowed for other concepts to be within our reach, within every creature's reach. Yasuo is one of those creatures. His control domain allowed for this to be possible. He can vaguely sense time even with his normal domain, and as his sense gets stronger, so is his sense of time. So naturally, he can control time but tend to avoid doing so. The reason being is the word efficiency. If he can erase someone by the dark substance or his vision construct easily and with minimal consumption, then why would he use time with its massive consumption? He has so many methods, abilities with better consumption and results, thus his rare usage of his time control, especially in offensive fields. His aura pool is getting larger and larger at an extreme speed, to the point even the mightiest of beings would be horrified catching even a glimpse of that speed. As his genes evolved, so did every part of his body, to the point he can confidentially say he surpassed Miriam by far. Even then, he still finds time control to be severely consuming. However, that doesn't stop him from playing with it and train his proficiency for a future where that is a problem no more. And so, Yasuo could be seen relaxing on the back of his dark and colossal pet, the black dragon, Darko. That has been a routine of his since arriving at the Dark Continent and settling here. A cycle of research, spending time with Morena and Aluka, then a bit of exploration. He's rarely in a hurry, so he usually takes his time and lets Darko leisurely fly around the continent. He has plenty of time, and he could even be considered to be semi-immortal at the moment. In contrast to the butterfly on his hand aging at an extreme rate. What seemed responsible for that is the purple sphere surrounding it, not granting mercy even after it died, for even its body disintegrated into nothingness soon after. Nitro Rise, a commodity too rare even in the Dark Continent, is common cabbage to him. That with the addition of his negative rose allows for his body and soul to always be in perfect condition, unaging and eternal. After numerous hours of research, Yasuo found that reproducing nitro rice isn't actually that hard to do, well, to him at least. To others, it would be an impossible job. However, Yasuo happened to have all the necessary means to do so. How could he not? By this point, his arsenal of abilities can be counted on 3 fingers. All he needed is a soil capable of nourishing it, and rich enough to accommodate it. He has a lot of that, as when he teleported to the Dark Continent, he brought back massive amounts of it with him. The soil he brought back is the one nitro rice was growing on, so naturally, it's suitable. In fact, it could even be said to be magical. Plant a seed of grain in it and nourish it enough, then it will turn it into a sacred plant. Of course, that's an exaggeration but should provide an accurate description of the soil's distinctiveness. Another thing he needs is a rich area, an area rich with something specific, energy. He knows of such areas, he has been to a few of them, and something interesting about those areas is that they're all magical. No matter the differences, there is always something miraculous in such areas, and in this case, nitro rice is that miracle. It wasn't long before he reached one of those areas. This is an area he has been to, a vast expanse of rice fields, nitro rice fields. This is the same area he's been to previously, and just as one might predict, there is not even a speck of nitro seeds anywhere in the field. He had already harvested them all. He and Darko flew over the location silently, as no one of the dangers in the area even noticed their existence, seemingly hidden within the void. "Darko, go up and wait for me," ordered Yasuo before merging with the void and instantly appeared deep beneath the ground. He was continuously teleporting through the ground deeper and deeper. The muddy and rocky ground was no obstacle for him. It was as if he was moving in an alternate dimension, seemingly appearing in a higher dimension, making his existence and the grounds in the same area obsolete. That is a simple technique of his space control he calls space displacement, representing a phenomenon that happens when one produces a precise type of vibration in space. That fluctuation seems to affect space in a way that creates two space fields on top of one another, two sides of the same coin. And to a certain extent, this is what space control is all about, producing that rhythm and controlling space in a way that produces the desired effect. He went deep into the planet until he reached an interesting area where he didn't have to use space displacement anymore. He appeared in a vast vacant area, strikingly familiar to him, not just because he's been to similar areas many times before, but also because he has been here before. "It's good to be back and see the fruit of my labor," remarked Yasuo, gazing at familiar spectacle. Not too long ago, when he teleported to the Dark Continent in the middle of the Chimera Ants battle, his goal wasn't just nitro rice. The clue to eternality was merely a side dish for him. What he truly wanted is what's deep beneath the ground. Back then, with the insane amount of power he had, he created 6 explosive spheres and traveled with them deep into the ground to achieve the spectacle before him. The spectacle of the creature of the depth thoroughly painted in his color, a deep purple color. The numerous purple lines allowed for such a scene to be possible. However, there was something I couldn't do before, and it's necessary, so excuse me for a bit," said Yasuo in satisfaction after looking at the work of art of his crafting before bringing a small test tube from the very depths of the void. What's within the tube is something familiar because everything he comes across a limb of the creature of the depths, he does the same thing. He brings out a test tube with a purple liquid in it. Next, that liquid disappears into the inside of the creature's limb, mixing with the transparent liquid within. That purple liquid seemed to act like a virus, continuously spreading and thoroughly painting the creature in its exquisite color. Yasuo blinked while looking at the creature before saying, after second thought, "You're strikingly similar to a jellyfish, as your limbs are basically tentacles. You are also composed of 3 layers, as far as I know: an outer layer, called the epidermis, a middle layer made of a thick, elastic, jelly-like substance called mesoglea, and an inner layer called the gastrodermis." Yasuo started stroking his earring, thinking of a more suitable name for the creature and its species if there are actually creatures similar to it. "The only difference is that you're the greatest jellyfish of all, and the water you swim in is the vastness of space, and your fuel is your will." "Well, there are many differences. You don't have any venom in your tentacles, meaning you don't sting, but that's because you don't need to, as touching your skin is the representation of death itself. And even coming close to your core is but a death wish, I know, for I have tried many times but never succeeded. In futures that didn't actually happen. So I will name you in the language of the ancients, and by your greatest achievement and will. Thaumatis epithymias." His calm words echoed throughout the area for a long time after fading into the void with his next destination already predetermined. Of course, he won't forget about one of the most interesting phenomena in the old granny's memories. His next destination is none other than the closest forest to the world tree, what they called the Forest of Esvania, a place where a great treasure lies, buried beneath the ground. A cursed artifact. However, that's not Yasuo's only goal, for he can see an even great treasure, the forest itself. How can a place where humans stayed safe for centuries without any trouble or calamity be normal? There must be more to it, that he knows. He also knows that it could potentially be something none can expect. His theory regarding it dictates that for that to be possible, there either has to be a sacred power protecting the place, or an even bigger danger, lying dormant beneath their very feet. Perhaps, all of their lives, the humans that once lived there were walking upon the ground which can devour and erase them at any moment, oblivious to that fact. Chapter 207. Ha! Ha 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 ha. The sound of laughter echoed throughout the inky night sky. The sound's source seems hidden within the darkness of the night, barely visible. The sound echoed continuously in several locations nearly at the same time, but no matter how much one looked for the source of the sound, they will never be able to find it. That sound is but a mere remnant of the past, as its source has already broke through the limitation of sound and space. The shadowy black dragon, flying at a speed surpassing the hypersonic speed by far, could faintly be seen. However, it only takes Darko a few seconds of flying before going through a portal again and again. The man mounting the dragon is none other than Yasuo. The sound echoing far behind him is his. Yasuo's eyes were radiating in fluorescent light, making his beautiful scarlet eyes glow even more. He had a radiating smile on his face, one of pure astonishment, marvel, and amusement. The source of those overwhelming emotions is the strange energy shape floating above his right hand. It was a transparent shape, a cylinder. It looks static, just floating there, but if one paid attention to it across a certain period, a movement would be noticed. The energy cylinder was moving, but it was moving so slowly it was almost entirely impossible to detect. A snail could be considered a rabbit in contrast to its speed. Of course, Yasuo has his domain, so even the most minute of movement wouldn't escape his senses. He sensed the cylinder slowly moving and deemed it will take it days to travel a single centimeter. However, he also discovered something else. The cylinder's speed was slowly increasing. It was increasing so slowly it might as well be considered negligible, as that continuous increase in speed will only be noticeable after weeks. I had my theories regarding how you work, but I'm still amazed at how you work. The laugher stopped, and what took its place is his calm words that couldn't hide the amazement within. The simplest of abilities but the most complicated at the same time, remarked Yasuo before adding. That simpleness is what allowed me to mimic the ability in this short amount of time. However, that complicated is the obstacle standing before me and anyone seeking to make the ability useful in any way. Yasuo couldn't help but let out another laugh, thinking of the cylinder's speed. Honestly, you make even a sloth, the representation of laziness and slowness, look fast. It was at this point in time that his eyes shone brighter than ever while gazing at the cylinder as if it's his most prized treasure. However, I know your potential, nay, I've seen your potential and know exactly of what you can do. I know of your infiniteness. After all, I've seen you surpass the speed of light and go far and beyond. After studying the miraculous cylinder for a bit, calmness returned to his pale face as his finger slowly moved towards the shapes, seeking to gently touch it. Now, however, you're the epitome of fragileness and feebleness, even the still air threatens to extinguish your existence. His words declared the erasement of the cylinder from reality because as his finger came in contact with it, it crumbled into nothingness. He didn't do anything in particular, that was truly just his finger gently touching the cylinder and in the least amount of force possible at that. Yet it crumbled to pieces, seemingly already seeking just the weakest of reasons to extinguish itself. That is how frail the cylinder currently is, in contrast to the ones he faced before, which seemed to contain the force of myriad worlds within, capable of extinguishing the world whole. Yasuo's emotions seemed to be on a roller coaster, quickly changing in seconds as a smile surfaced on his face. In the field of patience, I lost against you, and it will probably take a long time to reach your level. Dawn Freaks, you have earned my respect, no matter how meaningless that respect may seem. Well, his respect is meaningless because it will not change his course of actions no matter what, as long as his research requires it. That respect can change. Taking into account the cylinder's current speed and the rate at which it's accelerating, it should take numerous years for it to surpass the speed of light, yet he was able to do so. Unless he had another ability that helped in this regard, or some kind of vows and limitations that made the process faster, but even then, it should take hundreds of years for it to be usable. The cylinder is the ability he mimicked after facing the rain of cylinder bullets. He allowed one of the bullets to him, which allowed him to mimic it. Surprisingly, he found it easy to mimic, way too easy. After experimenting with it for a while, he pretty much figured out all the mechanisms of its working. The ability was named the Cylinder of Rising Force, and just as its name insinuates, its power is continuously increasing. How it works is quite simple. There is point A, which is the speed and force at which it started after Yasuo fully mimicked it. To change and improve the ability, one has to keep the cylinder always in action. The cylinder has to always be moving, which means its speed and force are also increasing, albeit slowly. The speed and force it reaches before the user unmanifested is point B, and that point B will turn into point A after that while keeping the same speed and force. So when the user manifests the cylinder again, it will start at a newer point A with a higher speed and force than the last point A, and the following improvement is point B until it becomes point A again. That basically means that the previous highest speed and force the cylinder reached is what it will start at next time. An example of that is none other than Dawn Freaks, who was able to drive it to an insane speed surpassing the speed of light. Henceforth, it will always start at that speed until it gets surpassed again. Of course, the same could be said for its force, as the cylinders were able to erase Yasuo's body and even the vision construct, akin to a knife slicing through butter. However, there is an interesting thing about this. Yasuo noticed, while it can always start at the highest speed and the cylinder needs to slowly improve on it, that rule doesn't apply to slower speeds. That means the cylinder can move at speeds below its highest speed depending on the user's wishes. Not just that, the cylinder can act as an offensive weapon which can erase anyone. It can also act as an unbreakable defensive shield due to its force, and it can also act as a transport vehicle. If the user manifests a large cylinder, he can enter it, and the insides of the cylinder seem static, unaffected by the cylinder's movement, as if it's an entirely different dimension. Yasuo took a deep breath of fresh air before exhaling as a tranquil smile surfaced on his face, and his tranquil words reverberated throughout the surroundings. You have your patience. I have my imagination and creativity. He said those words but knows quite well most than not, words are an empty concept and what matters most is actions, so he sought to prove it. A purple sphere appeared before him with another cylinder manifesting inside of it as Yasuo's scarlet eyes shone more than ever. He started controlling time within his amplification domain. His control domain is his greatest creation, and it will always be, no matter how far his research takes him in the future and what he will create. The cylinder within his amplification domain started moving at a noticeable speed, way faster than last time. In reality, it's moving at the same speed as last time, it's just that time was accelerate to the extent it started to look as if it's much faster. Yasuo was pushing his time control to its limit and befitting of time, it's quite consuming, which is why he couldn't accelerate time any further. There is only so much his brain can handle. His input capacity has certainly increased, quite a lot actually. In fact, it has increased to such extent it's just like the difference between heaven and earth in contrast to how it was before his transformation. Yet, even that increase was only able to do so much against time, and that says a lot considering he can go way above his brain's limits due to his astonishing regeneration. If the cylinder needs about 100 days of natural acceleration to become 10 times faster, then Yasuo accelerating the process 100 times with his time control will allow for it to reach that speed in day. This process isn't foreign to Yasuo because he has been doing it since a long time ago, except he has been accelerating himself as to accelerate his genetic evolution. That also allowed for his prowess to soar rapidly and is partially responsible for the massive increase in his aura pool. He also does so for training, as training in his time domain allows him to produce more results in much smaller amounts of time, relative to the outside world of course. As for the loss in his lifespan? Well, does a decrease of millions in infinity matter? Not really, especially considering he is nowhere near losing that much of his everlasting lifespan. It wasn't long before he reached his destination, a massive forest encompassing the horizon itself, spreading as far as the eye can see. Strangely Peaceful, Chapter 208. It wasn't long before he reached his destination, a massive forest encompassing the horizon itself, spreading as far as the eye can see. Strangely peaceful. Before anyone even enters the forest, they would notice something unusual. There is very little activity within the forest and its surroundings. That's not to say there is no life within it, because Yasuo is able to detect an abundance of it, and he also knows there is quite a bit of wildlife within due to the old granny's memory. However, what's peculiar about the place is that the life within it is strangely weak, relatively weak in contrast to the outside. There is never a peaceful day in the Dark Continent, and activity could be noticed everywhere. There is always something dangerous ahead, forcing one to always be cautious. That's not the case in the forest. It's a safe haven for the weakest of animals, as the predator seemed to have sensed something, and stayed away. The black dragon flew over the forest, ignoring the signs of danger it can sense, for it's already dead. Darko was leaving sonic bombs behind, bringing terror to the inhabitants of the forest, as something like this has never happened. It was like a catastrophe falling upon them as they retreated to their lairs in fright. Yasuo paid the frail creatures within no heed. Instead, he was focusing his senses on his surroundings. His domain was fully spread, everything within was within the palms of his hands. Of course, he sensed something. How could he not? It was too obvious for him, and evidently, it was also too obvious for Medusa, who just emerged clinging to him and staring warily in a certain direction. Surprisingly, his first stop wasn't in the direction Medusa was looking at. There is something he prioritizes more, hidden next to a tree. The forest looks extremely vast from upwards, but one can only appreciate its massiveness if his feet are on the ground. Everything is massive. The trees are hundreds of meters tall to even a mile. Even on the hottest and brightest of days, sunlight breaching through the trees and feeding the small amounts of undergrowth beneath is a rare sight. There are too many trees acting as a shield against the bright colossal sun. What's hidden beneath the trees' numerous rich branches is nothing but darkness, making the place even darker than it already is. However, there are places rich with life the sun can reach, vast expanses with very few trees within. Yasuo has just passed by such a place, a vast expanse filled with rubbles instead of trees, and life. The place seemed cursed, as not even a speck of life could be seen anywhere within or near it. What looks like the remnants of an ancient sentient tribe. The remains don't seem that old, as even signs of the things that brought destruction upon them still remain. It's quite obvious, because in contrast to the humid air everywhere else in the forest, this place is way too hot. Well, the burn marks everywhere made it obvious, and the fact that everything seemed to have been melted. The signs of what had happened here seem to have stood strong against time. The ages that have passed weren't enough to extinguish that fire, as if it's a curse. With the dragon's speed, anything on it would be sent off unless they're strong enough to cling to its scales. However, Yasuo was seated comfortably on its back, not clinging to anything, yet the air pressure was no match. His control domain allows for that to happen, so when he cancelled that control, he was naturally faced with the full force of the accumulated air pressure. Naturally, he was sent back while the dragon flew away into the horizon, specifically, towards the dark clouds far above the atmosphere. Yasuo was in a perfectly calculated freefall towards his exact destination until his feet gently touched the ground, elegantly landing. His eyes were glued towards a specific spot next to a decayed tree. In fact, the whole area seemed corroded. The surroundings' future was predetermined to be death, as every life around had their life force devoured, slowly but surely. Yasuo slowly walked towards the most corroded tree, which looks like it's disintegrating. Most of its branches were already devoured by nothingness. Not a speck of grass could be seen anywhere near his goal, and his goal was buried just right next to that tree. He stood over the area for a second, doing some actions of caution that couldn't be seen, just in case. Only once he made sure it's not dangerous to him did he unveil what lies beneath, as the object just suddenly appeared floating before him. A half-spherical object which looks completely clean, not a speck of soil or corrosion on it. "It's regenerating, huh?" remarked Yasuo, remembering how it looked after the old grannies used it for the last time, at the cost of life around it. Yasuo then closed his as his amplification domain got activated, surrounding the object and studying it thoroughly. His study didn't last long, as a bright smile surfaced on his face only a few minutes later. "Yeah, just as I thought." His study not only consisted in looking into the depths of the artifact with his domain, but also looking into its ancient past, looking to its very roots, the day of its birth. Yasuo let out a small laugh directly after. Humans can survive and plan for countering the vilest of calamities, but they can't survive a self-brought calamity. Then he turned his face, gazing in a certain direction. His eyes were seeing through space in order to see the source of the artifact until he disappeared. He emerged from the shadows of the night not long after, next to an outlandish small grotto. Outlandish as in everything around it is dead, the same as the surroundings of the artifact, not a speck of grass or plant life around. His feet only touched the ground for less than a second before he disappeared again, a scene that repeated itself several times. In contrast to the outside world where darkness envelops everything, the insides of the cave are quite bright. The grotto is incredibly beautiful and fascinating, with bright lights everywhere. The entire cavern was filled with glowing stones of all kinds of colors, radiating their lights upon the darkness and casting it away. Yasuo noticed water puddles everywhere, some small and some extremely large. All the plashes of water were notably bright, radiating with different glows, forming a mixed glow. The same could be said for the stream of water going all throughout the cave, which is the source of those puddles, and the reason why the grotto is so wet. It took Yasuo several teleportations to reach the thing he saw in the artifact's future. The grotto is extremely long, stretching deep into the ground. The first thing Yasuo noticed about his destination is the richness of energy within. His destination was a massive expanse at the end of the grotto, a large glowing naturally shaped hall. The richness of the energy was unrivaled by none of the places Yasuo visited before, even the large expanse where the jellyfish epithymius tentacles lie. It seemed as if the large, bright, and harmless hall was a natural attracting machine, sucking every speck of energy towards it, akin to a black hole. Strangely, against Yasuo's expectations, he felt no danger within the place or around it. However, the bells of danger still range in his mind towards his other destination. The same was for Medusa, who paid the place no heed and was still gazing vigilantly in a certain direction. Yasuo turned his attention to the artifact he's still holding in his hands, feeling it acting strangely. It was trying to move as if attracted by something in the cave. The artifact that couldn't previously do anything started flying in a certain direction once Yasuo let it go. Its happiness was unrivaled as it traveled through space to reach a large bowl-like stone filled with glowing water. However, its happiness was short-lived, because just as it was about to touch the water, it disappeared, again appearing in Yasuo's hand. Only then did Yasuo turn his attention to the stone bowl. He would have noticed even without the artifact of desire's actions. It was quite an unusual object even among the unusual hall where everything shines brightly, and the reason is quite simple, it's because it's not shining. The stone bowl was the exact opposite of everything within the grotto. The water in it was glowing instead of the stone it's naturally made of. The water glow, however, was extremely faint, seemingly a fire on the brink of extinguishing. The other obvious thing about Yasuo could sense is that he could hardly sense anything about it. It was exactly like a black hole. One could clearly see it, or at least see its effect, but can never see what's within it, the thing that truly matters. Yasuo can see its effect. He can sense energy slowly flowing into the cave through the gaps of space. It was coming from everywhere but mostly from the bottom, the depths of the planet. That energy is none other than Nen, an energy that exists everywhere and in everything, but it's so faint it's almost entirely impossible to detect, even in the dark continent. In the grotto, however, it could be said that there is too much of it. Most humans would feel suffocated even standing within it, unable to breathe, and death will come soon after. Chapter 209. In the grotto, however, it could be said that there is too much of it. Most humans would feel suffocated even standing within it, unable to breathe, and death will come soon after. The sheer pressure of all of that accumulation of Nen can bring anyone to their knees, unable to stand up. However, Yasuo stood strong, unfazed. Then he started walking towards the stone bowl, disturbed by nothing. He of course remained cautious and used his amplification domain to observe it meticulously first. Just as he thought, it's not so much of an object as it is a being, a dead being that knows not the word decay. Yasuo sensed the same dark energy he can sense when Nanako appears. It was faint but still there nonetheless. Let's see, you're one of the gods, just like the god of choice. Most importantly, you are part of the cycle. However, I know that the last cycle's god was the god of choice, so you're even more ancient than him. Yet here you are, dead but no signs of damage on you at all. Yasuo's voice echoed throughout the grotto as he contemplated one of the things he finds interesting, fascinating even. He closed his eyes and allowed himself to be lost within the marvelous and rich energy with the cave, feeling it slowly getting absorbed by the large stone bowl. Your power had something to do with devouring, yet you weren't able to escape the cycle. Your desires, however, did. They survived indeed and feed upon the energy of the world fight against time and fate. Yasuo's eyes lit up directly after as he looked at the normal half-sphere in his hand. He noticed something about the artifact its victims couldn't. Your kind is usually quite smart, and you seem especially so. Your power is devouring, yet you created an artifact that can manipulate reality, an artifact that can grant wishes, and I know exactly how you did so. You made use of conditions and limitations. The one who made the wish will also pay a corresponding price. It's an exchange of sorts, but it works on the same principle. The victim will have something about them devoured depending on the wish they made. Even their free will insanity. Yasuo started stroking his urning with amusement apparent in his eyes, deducing many things about its past as he's inclined not to see any of the gods' pasts. Even if he saw it in the future, it could still be dangerous. There is no winning in your game, it wasn't created for that. It's a trap from which none can escape. Most importantly, you were quite lucky, being born here of all places. So close to one of its limbs. His voice echoed again as he faded into the depths of the planet. It wasn't long before he found his target and performed his usual ritual. He infected the transparent tentacle with his color. The zombie organisms again started spreading, fighting against the jellyfish Epithymia's devouring power. Epithymia's power, however, was a bit different than the bull's power, as the latter can attract and devour energy from far away while Epithymia's needs contact. Of course, Epithymia's power is on an entirely different level, akin to the difference between the depths of hell and the heights of heaven. That's why Yasuo found a strange scene surrounding this particular tentacle of Epithymia's. He found the surroundings completely barren, dry as if life was sucked from them. There was very little energy around, and even that small amount is getting slowly attracted and absorbed by the dead bull. Two beings fighting against each other for domination, but one seems weaker than the other. However, I know that you are the source, and while there are cases where the source is weaker, this is not one of them. Yasuo knows exactly how strong the dead creature is. For its desires remained untouchable through eons, millions of years passed, yet Epithymia's will remains. I also know that you're truly dead, and your will and desires can only do so much. You can only manipulate the world ever so slightly, as you have no control over your own power. Yasuo then disappeared again, leaving the zombie organisms to their own thing, fighting for domination against the creature's own devouring power. And strangely, they seem to be winning, slowly but surely. Yasuo's research and improvement of the organisms were massive, to say the least. They also happened to exist in an environment perfectly suitable for them, to the point nothing can rival it. The jelly substances composing the creature are incredibly rich with energy. In fact, the amounts of energy compressed within its insides are impossible to fathom. Yet, even with the gods of the world using their power as they like, its power has never decreased. In fact, it's increasing. Nevertheless, even Epithymia's has its limits. The energy was compressed to such degree it simply couldn't anymore, thus the richness of energy surrounding its limbs and the world. Yasuo appeared next to the stone bowl again with his eyes shining brightly. So you are its conduit to achieve what it wants, though its control over you is minimal. Yet Epithymia's will and desires seem satisfied, as if no matter what they do, you'll always be achieving your desire, as if their mere existence is producing the required results. Of course, he already thought about Epithymia's desires many times before. He thought about it a lot and formulated a few theories on what could its enemy be. All the signs so far point towards a certain existence, a concept of sorts, but how could it have the power to kill Epithymia's? As far as he knows, its power is illusionary, so how could it kill something real? To Yasuo, Epithymia's desires seem hopeless, seemingly a child still hoping Santa exists. Or another child believing that his actions can actually change the whole world for the better and bring that wholly needed light to the world. They both are oblivious to the fact that their actions will change so little it's completely negligible, akin to a drop in the ocean. Yet even after death, and no matter how hopeless it may seem, it still persisted. Vengeance was deeply anchored to Epithymia's unexisting heart. Perhaps you succeeded, or your desires will be met in the far future. Yasuo smiled as many of his questions were answered before he added, though it all depends on my whims. Yasuo then lifted both of his hands and closed his eyes, focusing completely on his next action. The next spectacle is a result of numerous hours of meditations and research regarding how he can mix his abilities together to produce a specific result. That was always his strong suit, and how he turned so many good abilities into their absolute unimaginable state right now. From his left hand, the fire and blood of hell spurted out, a crimson fluid swiftly stabilizing between his hands in the shape of a sphere, mixing with the other substance coming out of his other hand. A dark fog-like substance that seems to be able to consume anything. It was the representation of the dark abyss itself. The two substances didn't seem friendly with each other as they fought an unimaginable battle for domination, a silent one but remarkable nonetheless. The dark fog is the ability he mimicked from his black dragon, Darko. The darkness that seems to be able to erase the whole cosmos from existence if there is enough of it seemed like a mischievous child before the scarlet substance. The child was trying to mess around and annoying the adult, to no avail. The scarlet substance even went as far as to consume most of the dark fog, leaving just a bit of darkness within. The scarlet substance is the result of Yasuo's bright scarlet eyes that were fully active at that point in time. It was the dark energy swimming within the rivers of his purple blood and his every cell, and it's under his complete control. The scarlet color is how it looks once the dark energy exits his body or shows itself to the world. The prime example is his current scarlet eyes. Yasuo is truly thankful for meeting Nozer and his people because that's what allowed for this to be possible so quickly and allowed him to have full control over that energy, all thanks to their ability which he mimicked. The combination of the two abilities is much more dangerous than what one might think, as its core is the dark energy, and it's quite dangerous just by itself, let alone combined with the dark fog. Yasuo can imagine how hard it's to erase the gods without any following repercussions, and while he knows he can do so with other abilities, he prefers to be cautious and do his absolute best. The combination was most suitable for the job which he calls the embodiment of erasement. The combinations he came up with were numerous, but they all have the word embodiment in them, due to his care about naming things and his perfect naming sense. Yasuo then disappeared, leaving the dark crimson sphere floating right next to the stone bowl, slowly going closer and closer to it. Yasuo appeared soon after, hundreds of miles away. Yet he can still sense the scarlet sphere clearly. That's a benefit of the dark energy which he found after a bit of training, that he could control it from the other side of the world. He wanted to watch the startling spectacle that always happens once an embodiment of his takes action. The numerous arrow-eye threads he left there allowed for him to see everything clearly. There was something, then there was nothing. That's the perfect description of what took place. Chapter 210. There was something, then there was nothing. That's the perfect description of what took place. There was a magnificent cavern. It was painted in numerous brilliant colors. Then the cave was no more. The scarlet sphere painted with dark lines was the cause of such a thing. The moment it made contact with the stone bowl, the latter instinctively tried to devour it, and it responded back. The scarlet sphere was small. Yasuo was able to hold it in his hands. However, it became small no more as the sphere instantly expanded, encompassing tens of miles of space all around. It happened in the blink of an eye, and after that meager period, the colossal sphere vanished, disappearing just as fast as it expanded. However, with its disappearance came a spectacle capable of bringing terror to even the mightiest of beings. Tens of thousands of literary space vanished from existence, never to be seen again. A significant portion of the forest was erased in the blink of an eye. The erasement was absolute, as not even the atoms that make up that portion was left. It was a thorough and absolute erasement of matter from reality. Yup, it's way too cool no matter how many times I watch it in action. The embodiment of destruction is also pretty neat. Perhaps I should try it on something else. I happen to know exactly what I should try it on. Yasuo's eyes shone with brilliance as he turned his head, gazing in a specific direction. He was looking in the same direction Medusa was looking at, still with wariness in her numerous snake eyes. However, Yasuo first looked at the object floating next to him. The half-sphere artifact that doesn't seem affected by the erasement of its creator. Of course, it's not that surprising, as it persevered even though its creator died long ago, leading Yasuo to believe its power can still work, and that it doesn't work solely by the existence of the devouring god. I still can't escape the conditions of another ability if those conditions get fulfilled. I will definitely suffer under your curse if I make a wish. But I don't need to. I have no interest in making any wish. Studying you, on the other hand, is something I'm quite interested in. I couldn't analyze Epithemia's power as it was simply impossible, but I can study yours. Yasuo then brought the only thing in his backpack out, a half-moon device engraved with exquisite inscriptions. That's his small storage device. It can also function as a teleportation device because that's exactly what it's. The device simply teleports things thrown within it to Yasuo's lab, and all he did is to throw the artifact of desires within before closing the device. The power of devourment, something that interests me. I was working on mimicking Morena's ability, specifically just the parts I want from it, but it's really not up to my standards. That is a perfect alternative until the final phase. A smile of amusement surfaced on his face directly after. He was amused and in anticipation, picturing the future where he will slowly dissect the artifact until he unveils all of its secrets and gets what he wants from it. I'm looking forward to it. Slowly but surely, I will analyze even your soul. After all, according to my sense, the artifact is made of normal metal. Then he faded into the horizon, going through a portal that leads to his next destination. Some of the arrowy threads that he was manipulating to spread all around the forest are looking directly at it after all. He appeared in a normal-looking part of the jungle, just as normal as most portions of it. However, Medusa, who was cautiously observing the ground, seemed to beg a difference, knowing full well the extent of the danger there. Yasuo frowned, looking at the scene changing before him as he appeared in a bizarre location deep beneath the ground. Yasuo gazed at his surroundings. Caution was apparent in his eyes. In fact, he has never been this cautious, as his sense of danger rang like never before. He felt like the things walking around were capable of actually touching him, seemingly able to breach the constraints of time to reach him. Yasuo observed as those things slowly turned their faces towards him, staring directly at him. That was extremely strange for Yasuo, because he knows the extent of his abilities, especially Perfect Plan, which allows him to be invisible even against the strongest of creatures. In fact, even the most sensitive of creatures would find it hard to even feel his touch upon them, as that's the extent of his ability. However, those things were directly staring at him as if he's the light at the end of the tunnel, seemingly a beacon in the middle of an inky night. What lies before him is an especially bizarre sight. The sight of a massive city that stood the test of time. In fact, the city looked as if it's untouchable by time. Yasuo could see houses as far as the eyes can see. The strange thing is that he could only see them because the dark isn't a problem for his eyes. He can clearly see and sense everything, as there was not even a speck of light in the city. It was completely dark. The houses were well designed, having a sense of ancientness that makes them look even more exquisite than they already are, especially with their medieval-like designs. The houses had a timber frame. Panels that did not carry loads were filled with wattle and daub. Wattle was made by weaving twigs in and out of uprights. They felt cold, damp, and dark. It was too cold outside, but even colder inside, as if the cold was their inhabitants' guardian angel. There were very few windows on the houses, if any at all, and they were but simple small openings with wooden shutters that were mostly closed. That level of coldness shouldn't exist underground, especially at this depth. It should be extremely hot, and Yasuo knows it because he explored the depths of this planet many times. In all of those time, he found that the rules of his old world regarding this subject also applies in this world, yet here is a place that contradicts his previous conclusion. This of course isn't that strange considering the weirdness of this world and its magicalness. However, even for such a world, this place is especially unique even among the most bizarre of cases. The air is extremely chilly, or at least, that's how it feels. Yasuo however knows that there is no air in this godforsaken location. The city hidden deep underground with no exits has no air, yet it was extremely chilly, threatening to freeze and shatter the indestructible bones of Yasuo hidden deep below numerous barriers of pure resistance. Furthermore, even with that bones freezing cold, Yasuo saw no signs of ice anywhere. There is no water or air for ice to consume. Yasuo's domain had bombarded him with numerous pieces of information the moment he set foot in there. One of them is the absence of food and many human necessities within the place. That's especially weird once one considers the abundance of humans in the city. The strange thing about them is that even the humans that were far away, so far away they couldn't possibly see Yasuo. Yet the moment he emerged in the city, they started heading in his direction, looking at him through the buildings that should in theory hide his existence from their dark eyes. Everything about them was normal except for their eyes, inky eyes. Even the emotions that appear on their faces resembled that of a human being. Yasuo however can see much more, and even he was weirded out by what he can see. There is just something too bizarre and freaky about how they behave. It looked as if they were wearing a mask, hiding the utter horrifying reality beneath, a reality which Yasuo can see. They have bones, normal bones just like any other human being. They have skin, normal skin, and hair growing on it, and that's it. That's pretty much their entire composition, as what's beneath their mask, what's beneath their skin is nothing but darkness. The dark energy was not ominous in the least, nor was it like the dark energy his scarlet eyes produces. It felt more like an energy of pure desperate obsession. That obsession seems to be the unending fuel keeping them going and what dictates their purpose in existing. Yasuo remained standing in the middle of a large playground within the city. He kept observing the people of the town as they all assembled together, and in return, they all stared at him with a bizarre gaze as if they're looking at an alien. None of them even spoke a word until everyone in the town assembled and they all laid their eyes on the uninvited guest. Their assembly seemed to trigger something in them as each and every one of them spoke the same exact words. "Welcome to our small humble town, may you tell us what you want and where exactly did you come from?" From children to the old ones, every one of them uttered those same words. Only a second passed before they seemed to realize what just happened, what they just did, as one of them walked to the front with a hint of apology on his face in contrast to the weird look they all had before. "Hey! Quick break time. Did you guys know that Togashi almost made Killua the main character instead of Gon? He was designed to contrast Gon, but during development, Togashi considered flipping their roles entirely. Which I personally think would have made it way better with Killua running it. But whatever. Let's keep going." Chapter 211. Only a second passed before they seemed to realize what just happened, what they just did, as one of them walked to the front with a hint of apology on his face in contrast to the weird look they all had before. "I'm sorry for our strange welcome, we're just not used to having guests around here. So our caution should be understandable, right?" "Well, this is strange, too strange. What's with their behavior?" thought Yasuo, kind of confused regarding their quick behavior change. At one point, they seemed extremely fake and mechanical, and at another, they became extremely human. A bit of research and examination is needed. Thinking of that, Yasuo started his experimentation directly as a bright smile surfaced on his face. "You needn't apologize, I understand. I'm lost and I found myself in other people's homes, so I understand and am sorry for the inconvenience." Yasuo's voice and tone were strangely different than his usual tone. It was as if he was trying to mimic their way of talking and accent, as if he was trying to fit in. There was a strange second of the silence of the city of netizens looked directly at Yasuo's eyes, each and every one of them. Yasuo did the same as he looked at the middle-aged man's inky eyes. Not just that, his expression was the same as him, and just like everyone in the city, his expression takes a second or so to change. No worries, responded the middle-aged man, nodding with a similar bright smile on his face. "But where did you come from? And excuse our cautiousness please, but it should be understandable, right?" Yasuo slightly narrowed his eyes hearing the peculiar response and responded accordingly. "Of course, it's understandable, so no worries. I come from far-away land, but I'm very friendly." Yasuo gave them half a second to comprehend what he said before he continued. "Thank you for allowing me to stay here temporarily, I really needed that, else I wouldn't have known what to do." Yasuo seemed to have skipped a few lines there. The situation was quite peculiar, it was too strange. Yet, the strangeness of the situation only continued to escalate as the middle-aged man smiled even brighter. "No worries, you seem very friendly, so you're welcome here whenever you want. In fact, you can stay in my place until you find your way." His tone was filled with enthusiasm as if he truly believes what he's saying, seeing nothing unusual about the situation. Yasuo gently looked around, noticing the townspeople heading back to their own business. In the end, only a few people were left in the place, the people that were already there and the middle-aged man who seems to be the governor of the town. No one of the people previously gathered there saw anything wrong with the situation, as the moment the governor responded to Yasuo, they just directly turned around and left, going about their business. Still, the strangeness will only continue to increase henceforth as the governor stood still in the same place, looking directly at Yasuo's eyes. They remained like that for a few seconds with no one else paying attention to the particularly strange situation as if they don't exist. Yasuo was also looking at the governor's pitch-black eyes, waiting to see if the latter can act by himself, yet they remained like that for more than a minute. Fascination, that was the right word to describe Yasuo's feelings at the moment, as he thought to himself, a faulty product but fascinating nonetheless. Only then did he open his mouth and said, "Please lead the way." Those calm words seemed to awake the governor from his slumber, from his frozen state, as he nodded and said, "Please follow." Yasuo smiled and followed after him. He was quite amused by the game he took part in. How could he not? This is the strangest thing he has ever faced. However, he didn't take the usual route and instead took a shortcut. He was basically exploiting the holes within the game to achieve what he wants. He wasn't sure what he did will work, but he tried it nonetheless. He had been observing these strange people for a while, their behavior specifically, and that's the result. The governor led Yasuo to an exquisite ancient house, humble, but its obvious ancientness made it quite elegant. It seemed to be one of the most luxurious houses within the city, at least from the outside. From the insides, however, it's completely bland with little to no furniture within it. Yasuo noticed two other people in the house. He noticed a middle-aged woman comfortably sitting on a chair and reading a book. Not far from the woman is a little boy who seems to be around 6 years old. He was playing around with few toys. The vibe was strangely peaceful, and not just within the house but in every part of the city. A strange peacefulness that can bring tranquility to the most sinister of hearts. The reason is quite simple. In contrast to their previous loudness, the people of the two rarely speak to each other or even to themselves. All that could be heard is the faint sound of people moving. The woman lifted her head looking at her husband and questioned after noticing the unknown visitor, "Who might that be?" Her husband amicably responded, "It's a friendly visitor that needs help. He needs a place to stay, so if offered him to stay with us until he finds his way." The woman nodded with a small friendly smile on her face and looked at Yasuo before saying, "Please treat the place like your home and don't shy away from asking anything." No amount of amicableness can make Yasuo ignore their dark eyes and what lies beneath their skin. He remained cautious and made sure to continuously scan the area around him just in case. He also wanted to avoid even coming in direct contact with any of them, but none of them seemed to be interested in doing so or even introducing themselves. Yasuo didn't mind and just nodded. The governor then led him to his room, an extra room they have that has just one bed and nothing else. Yasuo sat down on the bed and closed his eyes, focusing on sensing everything within his time which envelops the whole city and beyond. He was at first suspecting that the black energy within the people here should in theory also exist in every part of the city. He even used his amplification domain discreetly to check to the atomic level and even beyond, yet he found nothing. It only exists within them. After investigating the city a bit more, Yasuo opened his bright eyes thinking to himself, "The black energy is definitely somewhat related to the dark snakes I found buried in the Crimson Land. They're just way too similar. The only difference is that the dark snakes seem to be much more dangerous and extremely meticulous, while the one within them feels a bit too simple." A smile painted on Yasuo's face, and that tells me a lot. No matter who Don's enemy or target was, he was most likely from this town, and perhaps, the town wasn't an underground city but existed on the surface. Somehow, either by him or something else, the town was destroyed, and that left a shadow in his heart if he had any, or he simply did it himself for some unknown reason. Yasuo then frowned, feeling a bit uncomfortable that he can't use his memory reading ability to see the town's past. Well, he can, but he's inclined not to take the risk. The creature that made this strange town work as it is now is definitely not simple. And with all the trouble he probably went through to create it, he probably had a close emotional connection to it. So looking through time at him will definitely be disastrous and force Yasuo to use his last means when it's not fully ready, akin to eating fruits when they aren't fully ripened. The fruit will be eaten, but it will be nowhere near as delicious as it will be when fully mature. No matter how much trouble and weirdness Yasuo went and will go through for his research, he will always remember this month as the strangest and creepiest of all. He was truly dedicated to his research and experimentation, so he was barely fazed by the disturbing town. He wholeheartedly focused on a process of trial and error to solve the convoluted ways the black energy work. He observed their behavior and mimicked it, trying to fit in as well as test his mind and fight against the unknown, because that's humanity's greatest enemy and biggest fear. Fear is part of our human DNA, and so it is not unusual for you to feel fear when you are stepping out into the unknown. Our brain is hardwired to prefer negative consequences to uncertain outcomes. Our brain does not like us stepping out into the unknown or living in a world of change. However, if the unknown become known, then that'll be a problem no more. And so, we have the scene of Yasuo sitting on a chair next to the dining table just like everyone else. The other three people in the room are the governor and his wife as well as their child. They are all sitting around the table, which has few clean bowls and wooden spoons, cups, and plates. The peculiar thing about this is the fact that they're all empty, and what the people in the room doing is simply looking in front of them. This is a ritual Yasuo is used to by this point because he has gone through it many times. They are eating dinner, chapter 212. The peculiar thing about this is the fact that they're all empty, and what the people in the room doing is simply looking in front of them. This is a ritual Yasuo is used to by this point because he has gone through it many times. They are eating dinner. Of course, there is no food within the underground town, thus no dinner to have, which only makes it even more peculiar. The strange scene is something that could be noticed all over the town, as each of its people does the same. They assemble around the dining table and just sit there looking in front of them without a single change in their expression. Yasuo also noticed something else. It doesn't matter how close the people of the town seem to each other, they rarely interact, if ever. Except for the sound of their footsteps around the town, no other sound could be heard. It was pure bizarre silence. Well, there is an exception. Yasuo noticed one location where different kinds of sounds could be heard. He noticed it a long ago, the moment he set foot in the town, because the same exact scene was repeating itself since then. The strange scene of a middle-aged man who looks drunk despite the lack of any wine within the town. He was screaming and spitting a strange dark substance at the other person within the house. The house wasn't that far from the house Yasuo is living in, and two people live within it. According to Yasuo's observation through his domain, it's certainly the strangest place in the town with the most unusual people within. A father abusing his child isn't really that strange because it happens a lot, but it's certainly strange in this town. Every other person within it has a pattern they follow, seemingly programmed to follow that design perfectly, but the exception is the father and his child. They also follow a pattern, but it's completely different from everyone else's behavior, especially once one sees the thing hidden inside the basement of that house. The father has a simple routine of simply abusing his child, spitting, and hitting the child using a whip with little to no mercy for no particular reason. After doing so for a while, he carries the unconscious child and throws him into the basement. Once the child regains consciousness, all he does is crawling towards the thing hidden in the basement. A naked dead body with an obvious red mark all around its neck, and several whips marks all over its body. Yasuo knows the body has survived the test of time, as it remained in the same shape and form for all the time he has been here, and he also knows it remained intact through thousands of years. That is the body of a dark-haired woman who seems to have a strange face, completely disfigured and broken, not naturally but by what seems to be the hands of her husband. The child crawled desperately to his mother without a hint of whimpering or any sound to protest the astonishing amount of pain he's feeling. He held her cold dead hand and slept next to her for the whole day, and that small gesture seemed to bring a bright radiance to his existence and a reason to live. The radiance however wasn't strong enough to overshadow the darkness that is his body because, in contrast to every other netizen of the town who at least have skin, he has none. The boy was but a bag of darkness without skin to hide the ugliness inside because amidst the darkness is what looks like numerous snake-like bugs crawling around, petite but seems to be multiplying. At least for the next few hours, that radiance brings a bit of light to the dark house, to the basement, a sense of peacefulness and warmness. It was however short-lived because the father didn't seem to have any appreciation for that light. After throwing his child into the basement, he goes to his room to sleep. Well, it's not exactly sleeping because the only people that sleep in the town are the boy and his dead mother. Everyone else simply rests down on their body and looks at the ceiling for a few hours before waking up. They don't close their eyes or they don't seem to be able to do so, they can't even blink. Their inky eyes are always open. And that's exactly what the father always does before waking up and going down to the basement. He opens the door only for the scene of his dead wife and his child warmly sleeping next to each other in an eternal slumber. That seems to trigger a violent response from him as he stutters his steps to the two and starts hitting them ruthlessly with his whip, the dead mother and the child both. That seems to always bring the child to the realms of the living as he starts to desperately protect the lifeless body of his mother, at the cost of receiving all of his father's blows. The father then kicks the child away and focuses on hitting the dead body while shouting some incoherent words, gibberish with no understandable meaning. The child however doesn't seem to give up as he again hopelessly crawls towards the dead light in his life only to be kicked again. However, the child never gives up and continues to crawl towards her until the father finally snaps and carries the child out of the basement, closing the door behind him. He brings the child above and starts to hit him solely for the rest of the day with little to no mercy and attention to the child's life. Yasuo can however notice something the father doesn't seem to notice. He can see hints of relief within the child's vague and dark face. At least his father won't hit his mother anymore. Chapter 213. Yasuo can however notice something the father doesn't seem to notice. He can see hints of relief within the child's vague and dark face. At least his father won't hit his mother anymore. Yasuo's face was unusually calm watching the scene, but even someone like him was slightly affected seeing it for the first time. He couldn't help but frown, knowing exactly what the father's actions had done. What those actions led to is unbelievable. A case such as that isn't unheard of, but the coincidence that made completely unheard across the ages and dimension is the strangeness of the child. Yasuo knew the moment he laid eyes on him that the child is the creator of the town and the origin of its strangeness. He can smell the same sinister scent he smelled when he was in the Crimson Expanse in the child, the smell of the dark parasitical snakes. Yasuo knew there and then that the one responsible for nearly extinguishing humanity is that child or a grown-up version of the child. All because Yasuo sensed something else in him. He sensed the existence of desire with him, the existence of the bizarre creature named I. The same creature which exists within Aluka, Nanika. There is a difference however, a difference he speculates but is highly likely. The I within the child doesn't have any connection with the jellyfish epithymias in contrast to Nanika who can use its power, with a few conditions of course. He came to the conclusion because of one simple reason, only one conduit can exist at a time and currently, that conduit is Nanak. So the child couldn't have used epithymia's power to do what he did, yet he did have the astonishing power to do that. Yasuo's silver eyes couldn't help but shine brightly thinking of that, and thinking that this is the end of his research here until a later date. Then he disappeared, not willing to change anything in the town or erase it. He's still quite cautious of the one who created it. Perhaps later when everything is done, I will erase Yule and give you some kind of peace. Even if Yule aren't really humans or living beings. Those are Yasuo's last words before leaving the lace as he decided to target two of the most interesting calamities, something he postponed for too long. His next destination was none other than the Paps, mysterious beasts that feed on humans and keeps them as pets. Yasuo shuttled through space until he reached a specific mountain range that looks no different than any other. This was his first time visiting this special mountain range, the only place which they inhabit. His domain sensed them instantly, the lords of the mountain, yet one of the smallest creatures within. They are capable of turning even the most ferocious of creatures into mere dolls, humans and beasts alike. Yasuo first observed them, how they behave and what they can do. He watched them as they tamed the kings of the forest as if they're mere bugs, seemingly capable of taming even the gods to obedient toys. He watched as they slowly but surely fed upon the remains of their prey or the dolls around them. The old meat was eaten by them as if it's butter, even hard bones weren't an obstacle against the Pap's small mouths. Their big eyes were looking all around while eating, seemingly cautious or looking for more prey. Their strange shape allowed for that to be possible as their eyes aren't directly connected to their bodies. A long tunnel of flesh was connecting its body with its eyes, a tunnel in which its optic nerve exists, as well as its blood vessels. Yasuo can also see the most important part of the Paps, their tongue, which is extremely thin and long with a strange yellow bulge at its end. Yasuo slowly lifted his hand once he observed them enough and saw all he needed to see. On his hand appeared the scariest creature in the Dark Continent, not because of how it looks but because of its power that can bring unrivaled horror to every sentient being. The power to turn anything into obedient dolls and slowly play with them, completely at the Pap's mercy, knowing that one day, they will be hungry and slowly feed upon you with their small mouths. Just the sound of that can let anyone know of its horror. It's small enough to comfortably sit on Yasuo's pal, so one can only imagine how small its mouth is. That Pap slowly but surely eating you with its small mouth, it's simply a horrifying method of torture, especially knowing its prey can do nothing and can only sit there obediently awaiting its demises. The creature that can bring pure horror to the bravest of men is actually quite cute, at least from the outside. It looks like a simple snail, no different from any other normal snail except for its eyes and mouth. Its eyes are much bigger, nearly the same size as its body, while its mouth is extremely long. The yellow bulge is what's responsible for its bizarre ability, as Yasuo has observed one of its kind turning a certain animal into a doll. He saw its tongue drill directly into the animal's brain undisturbed, and it was but an instant before the animal became a doll. So he made sure to use his domain to firmly control it and not allow it to move. Then he did what he was here for. He extracted few drops of blood, light blue blood, which he made sure to experiment on it a few times in a future that didn't happen before consuming it. After all, he didn't know whether the Pap's blood is also responsible for its strange ability, so he didn't take any chance and saw whether it will affect him or not with his vision eye. After doing so, he collected a few more Paps before teleporting directly to his lab through the small teleportation gate in his backpack. He does so simply by sending an arrow eye thread through the gate, allowing him to look at his lab, thus being able to create a portal directly to it. He placed the cute creatures in an environment specially prepared for their abilities and continued with a few experiments before heading towards his most important target, the eye. Chapter 214. Just as I thought, remarked Yasuo while hovering in the darkness of the night and looking down on a normal-looking forest beneath him. The grass was overshadowed by the numerous massive trees all around. They also hid numerous wildlife forms all over the forest. Some are massive, thus quite apparent from the sky. Colossal creatures seem to be quite abundant in this part of the Dark Continent, life forms similar to dinosaurs and even more dangerous creatures. This is largely due to the ample amounts of oxygen in the Dark Continent and the richness of the place. However, the smaller creatures hidden beneath the curtain of trees could be just as dangerous or much more dangerous than the massive ones. The prime example of that inhabits the very forest before Yasuo's eyes. In fact, this creature could very well be the strangest and simplest creature in existence. It also has the potential to distort the very fabric of reality and ignore the universal rules. An example of that is Nanika and the Dark Child in the underground town. Of course, there is a difference between the two. Nanika could be considered one of the gods, a conduit of epithymias. On the other hand, the Dark Child seemed to have acquired his powers due to some twisted and crazy desires solely. Desire appears to be what drives the eye and what largely makes them so bizarre and heaven-defying. Yasuo thought and researched a lot about the history of the world and specially focused on epithymias. And he was able to confirm a theory of his only after laying eyes on the eye in their pure form. In the few previous times, he was only able to observe eye that is already merged with a host, such as Nanika and the Dark Child. He found out that he could barely perceive their existence as they became one with their host, which stopped him from performing any in-depth research on them. That especially applies to the Dark Child, as it's but a remnant of the past, akin to a video repeating itself due to the child's obsession. So he didn't learn much from it, but he did when his domain enveloped the several AIS scattered throughout the jungle. They're solely composed of some unknown energy, forming their illusionary bodies, but they truly exist. All due to desire. Yasuo's eyes were glittering as the small mystery before him was solved, or he confirmed his theory. He knows Nen is largely dependent on one's will and desires, and that especially applies to specialists. He also knows that in extreme situations, that willpower and desire could lead to some miraculous results, such as Gon's transformation. In contrast to normal evolution, which has led to our existence, the AS are solely composed of energy, an energy similar to Nen. Desire, Yasuo thought to himself. The desire of such miraculous creature was able to create another miraculous creature, which in turn led to the latter being a conduit of epithymias. However, epithymias is dead after all. So even though its desire was able to perform many magical things, it didn't really help that much in its hopeless desire. That's right, Yasuo always believed that the existence of I could only be explained with few specific possibilities. Them being created by epithymias is the most likely. And the reason and method are quite simple. Epithymia's drive is whatever killed it, or at least was a mortal enemy when it was alive. The method is even simpler. It's simply because of its desire, which was able to distort the fabric of reality slowly but surely. Gon's willpower and desire were able to give him a power strong enough to completely decimate Pito. And epithymia's desires and astounding willpower created the world we live upon today. Yasuo was able to travel to the core of the planet in few futures that didn't happen, and he saw what lives there. There is no normal hot solid core, epithymia's is the core, and all of the hot steamy energy in the depths are being absorbed by it. Yasuo's imagination went even as far as to theorize that the existence of this planet is solely due to epithymia's desire, which continuously shaped its surrounding to an environment where its desire can have even a sliver of hope of being fulfilled. However, Yasuo knows it's but mindless desperation with little to no planning, but its desires did enough. After all, one of Yasuo's theories states his existence in this world is due to that desire. No matter how unlikely that theory is, it's still the most likely possibility Yasuo has considering his current knowledge. That possibility especially becomes more unlikely when epithymia's enemy is considered, and according to Yasuo's speculation, it's highly unlikely to let such a thing happen. Well, I'll find out sooner or later. Well, it's more like extremely soon. The last phase of my plans will only need a few years to be complete. Moreover, with finding a few more of epithymia's tentacles, I should be able to lower that time significantly, and there is one beneath my feet right now. Slowly, a small smile of anticipation surfaced on Yasuo's face as he dived into the depths of the planet, and again doing the same thing he always does in such a situation. And that's all he did for the next few months, as all the pieces lined up, leaving only one more, which is unnecessary, but Yasuo seeks perfection, so he intends to go all the way. The last step is none other than the World Tree, the one true World Tree which goes through the high and dark clouds in the sky, reaching hundreds of thousands in height, yet it still stands, vigorous and healthy. This is the same tree that was able to devour much of the old granny's life, and that says a lot considering her life force could allow her to live for thousands of years. In fact, she had no chance, because the moment she touched it, she almost died, and if not for her quick reaction, her life would have been completely devoured. Yasuo didn't stop once he reached it or paid much attention to it. Instead, he continued to fly higher and higher, seeking to reach the top. Chapter 215. Yasuo didn't stop once he reached it or paid much attention to it. Instead, he continued to fly higher and higher, seeking to reach the top. He noticed numerous skeletons scattered all around the bast of the world tree, seemingly sucked dry. There was an obvious sense of death surrounding the area, warning any new prey from coming close, lest they become victim to the all-devouring tree. That deadly vile atmosphere was a sign akin to the radiance of the full moon in the middle of a dark night, stopping all creatures from approaching. In fact, the level of ominousness surrounding it managed to create a vast area around it with little to no creatures to be seen. However, there is an exception: the dragons flying all around. Encircling them is some kind of fog with varying colors depending on the dragon's colors. The fog was working as protection, stopping the obvious deadly force from having any effect on them. The sinister force being the devouring power of the world tree, affecting everything around it, albeit slightly. As Yasuo knows, it's able to devour things almost instantly, provided it's in direct contact with it. It also can devour things without direct contact, but it's an extremely slow process that the dragons gained immunity to. They took the surroundings of the world tree as their home, specifically, above the dark clouds. Those clouds are their nests, but they go down sometimes looking for food or just flying around. It wasn't long before Yasuo went through the curtain of dark clouds hundreds of thousands of miles above the ground. The scene that lies above the darkness was fascinating. Nothing like darkness. It was a magnificent view of a vast expanse of dark clouds as far as the eye can see, but with a difference: the brilliant and scorching sun rays with little to no barrier had an effect of bringing a majestic brilliance to the expanse. Yasuo could see dragons everywhere as far as the eyes can see. This wasn't the first time he went above the dark clouds, but the view he saw before and this one has little in common. At that time, he only found one black dragon, but now he can see numerous dragons, one different than the other, but the black dragons seem to be some kind of royalty amidst their numerous kind. Yasuo then laid his glittering silver eyes on the tree that didn't stop after going through the clouds but went for a few more miles. Its top seemed especially fascinating, with numerous dragons flying continuously around it, seemingly enthralled in the magnificence of the world tree. The scene was truly captivating because the treetop worked as some kind of magnet, attracting the various kinds of sun rays around it. The combination of all of that created a magnificent combination of massive aurora surrounding it, with numerous prismatic objects flying through it. Those are the captivated dragons strolling amidst the miraculous place, from small dragons to mature ones. Yet, none of them seemed to notice the clear intruder floating right under their eyes, seemingly invisible. Yasuo was certainly enthralled with the place, but just like the dragons, he remained cautious and didn't come in contact with the tree. The dragons seemed to know the result of approaching it too closely, so no matter what, they keep distance. Yasuo flew to the top of the tree while of course keeping distance, yet strangely, there weren't any signs of dragons' remnants on top of it like the numerous skeletons at the bottom. The area was extremely clean, which is strange. It stands to reason that the dragon needs to have an example to learn from as to not approach it. And Yasuo knows their senses can't pick anything strange about it because he himself can't sense even a hint of danger from the tree. It seems to be able to devour anything and everything, not allowing its prey to notice anything. Except for Medusa, who is clearly cautious of the tree with a numerous snake on its head carefully keeping an eye on it. Yasuo also noticed something even more interesting, and the reason why its devouring power is so massive at its top. Perhaps the reason for its devouring power. At the center of the treetop, there is a vast wooden space, kind of flat but naturally shaped. There are little to no leaves or branches on its top, but nothing dared to take such a naturally shaped place as a home, a safe and comfortable home. Well, the point is that it's not safe. Yasuo made sure to test that as he controlled one of the dragons and directly teleported it on top of the tree. It made contact with the tree instantly, and its destiny was henceforth determined. The dragon was dead almost instantly, and the way it was devoured left nothing from it, no remnants. It was as if it turned into eggs that were directly absorbed by the tree, leaving nothing. And the auroras surrounding the tree started to change directly after as the attraction force of the tree got stronger and stronger. The magnificent scene of the auroras only became more captivating henceforth. It was as if the world tree was celebrating the delicious meal. But only a few minutes passed before the auroras returned to their original shape, and the scene reshaped itself to its previous look. Well, except for the countless dragons that have noticed the previous strange scene, especially the view of one of their kind getting devoured, so that naturally caused a commotion. It was however hopeless because they couldn't find any reason as to why the bizarre scene had taken place. They can't see the one responsible after all. It's certainly interesting. I'm pretty sure I have already found a significant portion of Epithymia's limbs all around the world, so all I need is time, and this is a good place, so wait so. As Yasuo thought of this, he teleported directly to the top of the tree, to a place close to the center of the treetop where the core of the tree has taken place. Yasuo slowly lifted his hand as a test tube appeared in it with a purple liquid within that soon disappeared. Yes. He found another part of Epithymia's, but this one seems special. Chapter 216. Yasuo slowly lifted his hand as a test tube appeared in it with a purple liquid within that soon disappeared. Yes, he found another part of Epithymia's, but this one seems special. It looks more like a thin tree trunk with several thin branches on its top. It's however not a tree, it's part of Epithymia's. The fact it's transparent with some kind of jelly-like substance flowing slowly inside of it is proof of that. The purple liquid was teleported directly inside of it as it started painting it in its color. However, the process seemed extremely slow and will probably take a long time for the special zombie organisms to multiply to a degree where they can paint this specific body part in their color. Furthermore, if Yasuo wanted for the organisms to fully take over Epithymia's, then it will take an extremely long time, but that's what he's working on, making that time shorter. So he sat down in the middle of the air, hovering above the treetop in a meditative position. The air around him became still as he closed his eyes and focused completely, seemingly ignoring his surroundings. But he's not worried at all. His massive domain is enveloping nearly 30 miles around him, and Medusa is guarding him carefully, keeping an eye on everything around. That's not really that needed as he's using perfect plan, allowing him to become completely invisible, but he still did so nonetheless. Just in case. Slowly, a strange transparent Nen ball appeared before him. Following directly after, a cylinder appeared continuously moving around him with its speed slowly increasing. He didn't stop there as tens of other abilities appeared all around him, creating a magnificent sea of stars. They aren't exactly complete abilities but a primary manifestation of them, abilities he's trying to mimic and assimilate. Normally, he would let his special genes passively assimilate all of the bloodlines he gained and get their abilities naturally, but it's a slow process. He doesn't have much to do right now, so he decided to accelerate the process and consciously try to mimic them all. The most important reason, however, is to accelerate the assimilation process, which means his evolution. And he knows he dearly needs for his body to evolve far beyond the level of any creature in this world. The last phase will only work after that condition is fulfilled. So for the next few months, Yasuo remained static, hovering in the air. His insane Nen regeneration allows him to easily train for months, which is miraculous considering how many abilities he's using at the same time. The location of his training helped a lot, especially after he mimicked a certain interesting ability. The Stone Bowl, one of the gods who had a devouring ability, and even though Yasuo found it dead, its ability was still active, so Yasuo made sure to observe the ability in numerous futures. So he gave most of his time to completely mimicking the ability, and that made everything else so much easier. The massive vortex enveloping hundreds of meters around Yasuo is a result of that. All of the locations around Epithymia's body parts are always rich with energy, and now Yasuo is continuously devouring the unending ocean of energy around him. Strangely, while the devouring power has an effect in enlarging his aura pool, it's too small as it mostly replenishes his aura. He attributed that to either his proficiency in the ability or that's simply how it works, and he's inclined to think it's the latter, but it doesn't matter much to him. He knows that soon, he will get a much better alternative. He did communicate with Morena regularly through an ability of his but only visited her recently and spent some time with her and Aluka. He's pretty much about to fully assimilate all of the bloodlines he devoured, and he specifically focused on Miriam's ability, the photon ability. Yasuo opened his eyes, opening an abyss of scarlet blood that is his scarlet eyes, and they looked deeper than ever as if he experienced an eternity. He relaxed his body, which appeared to have been still for decades, a process he repeats whenever he wishes to leave the place even though only a few months have passed. Nevertheless, his movements were smooth and exquisite, and his pale skin shone with a faint luster of transcendence as if he left humanity far behind him and reached the realms of gods. His expression was just as tranquil as ever, but he appeared even more mature, and his eyes were radiating a luster of wiseness as if epochs were but mere seconds to him. Well, he wasn't at that level yet, but the years indeed passed in the blink of an eye for him. Only months passed, but to him, years passed as he hid deeply within a faint purple sphere, a completely distinct domain in which time moves differently. He used his control domain to its fullest and kept his time domain fully activated since he fully mimicked the devouring power which allowed him to handle the massive consumption. His genes have reached a whole new level, their complexity is unrivaled, seemingly a web of infinite universes within his body. My genes have no limit, so I can evolve infinitely, but I already assimilated all of the bloodlines I devoured, so I need more. Yasuo then lifted his hand as a simple transparent sphere appeared floating on it, and now everything is much easier with this. The transparent sphere started slowly floating away from him as numerous similar spheres appeared around him. The first sphere's speed suddenly increased and almost instantly reached the speed of light, and numerous other photons followed after it. Another photon appeared, though this one was enveloping Yasuo. This is an ability he dearly wanted because it's just that precious. Thinking and moving at the speed of light. How can someone not want that? Then he disappeared as he achieved what was once impossible and broke the barrier of speed. The speed of light is no longer a dream for him. Chapter 217. The seasons passed in the blink of an eye, welcoming the arrival of a new year and more years. The years were fleeting like lightning, but something never changed. And so, 20 years have passed, and those years were special as they introduced the coming of a new era. They welcomed an era where humans flourished and took back what was once theirs. They reproduced like ants and spread throughout the world as if it's their playground. Granted, their playground has some pretty deadly creatures, but did that stop them? No. They were greedy and curious about this unknown continent, and they already prepared for what's to come. They were ready to take over and harvest the treasures and resources lying all over the place. They were casualties, that's for certain, but that will never stop them. They were hell-bent on getting what their desires dictate they get. Of course, the Dark Continent is still too much of a challenge for humanity, and if they act with haste, all they will face is utter despair and death. At least, they constructed a few nests from which they can expand. To fully take over the entire Dark Continent? That'll take them thousands of years, at least. However, there is a specific force of human beings who are thousands of steps ahead of their kind, a force called the Silver Snake. They only have 3 bases in the Dark Continent, but each is so massive and vast that the forces of all of the other humans combined aren't even comparable in the slightest. That especially applies to the bases they constructed within the World Tree Forest, named as such due to its close proximity to the World Tree. The forest was extremely strange with very few creatures within but more than enough to sustain their constant need for food. The forest seemed to be deserted for ages, which are quite obvious by the massive accumulation of resources. The power of the silver snake continued to increase, reaching some miraculous heights largely due to the force's leader, Morena Zoldyck. She has an interesting ability which allowed her to have more abilities, and by using them, she was able to continuously elevate the force's power to unimaginable heights. However, only one person truly knows how far humanity has gone, if he could even be considered human at this point. But even if we exclude him, there is someone else who reached some miraculous level of power, Don Freaks. He reached such a level that even the destruction of a normal planet is within his capabilities, albeit it would take a long time. The only other person to surpass him just opened his eyes from a long slumber, Yasuo Zoldyck. It has been 20 years, yet he still remains in his chill and meditative state with little to no activity outside of his current location. He still remained calm and collected, continuing to expand upon his powers, still hovering above the world tree in the middle of the high sky's ethereal beauty. The only thing more enchanting than it is him, as his tranquility brought a new exquisiteness to the area. He was like an immortal to whom millions of years pass in the blink of an eye, ethereal and eternal. The only times he leaves this place are to spend time with his wife and sister or to get new bloodlines. However, 19 years ago, he assimilated all of the bloodlines on the planet except for one last bloodline. The ability to travel and think at the speed of light made everything much easier and allowed him to dig every part of this colossal planet and get every bloodline, useless or not. After that, he started spending all of his time on the top of the world tree and even created a portal gate there. All he has to do is pass through it and he will reach his family, and the same could be said for them. Sure, he can reach them in the blink of an eye without even using any of his teleportation abilities, but they can't. And at one point in time, Morena and Aluka even moved to his place, which is basically a palace he constructed above the world tree. A floating palace with its foundation being his massive miraculous octagonal lab. He still preferred to train just a few meters above the treetop. His devouring reached such a level that he can resist the devouring ability of the world tree, but he still finds floating in the air more comfortable. Though no matter how much he pushes his devouring ability, he still sees a large unpassable river between it and Epithymias's devouring ability. So while he can touch the world tree without any consequences, he's still unable to touch Epithymias, and that says a lot considering the monster he is right now. His eyes opened, releasing a blinding radiance upon the world, a crimson radiance due to his deep red eyes that only got deeper the stronger he became. He started stretching for a bit in the air. Remaining still for decades at a time can do that to a person. Only 2 decades passed, but for him, more than a century has passed. He never stopped using his time domain to continuously accelerate time in a bubble around him. That allowed him to reach a state where he can easily achieve what he wants in the latest phase of his plans, far surpassing his expectations and making everything rather simple. After that, he took a deep breath, inhaling oxygen he no longer needs. Then he exhaled, releasing a sigh of satisfaction, already seeing the future without even the use of his vision eye. A small peaceful smile surfaced on his pale face, enough to show the happiness he's feeling at the moment. He couldn't help but wonder in his mind, just how was I able to make something as gaining such unimaginable amount of power so simple? And my power will only get more broken from now on. With minimum effort. He closed his eyes, letting his domain stretch to its limit, reaching hundreds of miles in radius. His input capacity and processing power reached such a level to allow for such a thing to be possible, and even with his insane domain range, the consumption from it remains minuscule. Then he disappeared and appeared millions of miles away a split second later. He manifested in a barren land, a sinister vibe dominating the place and dearly seeking to be released upon the world. However, a faint golden light seemed to overshadow the place, sealing it and not allowing the darkness to spread. The faint golden light seemed to be a barrier not allowing what's inside to leave. However, it seems to be on the brink of collapse. The barrier, however, was no opponent for Yasuo, as he simply appeared within and the golden light didn't react at all, as if he doesn't exist. After all, the golden barrier isn't so simple as to be defeated by simple space abilities, but nothing is simple about Yasuo, so he didn't really need to prepare anything to pass through it. The golden barrier was shaped like a cylinder, and it seemed to do what it was supposed to, stopping the corruption from reaching the outside world. Everything within is bleak with a sense of death and desolation, but everything outside is rich with life and energy. Within the cylinder is an inky hand spurting from the earth, seemingly trying to escape, seeking freedom. However, there is another golden cylinder surrounding it, much smaller than the other one and tightly squeezing the pitch zero black hand inside. Some kind of inky matter seems to be continuously oozing out from it and spreading throughout the small cylinder, seemingly millions of minute ink snakes. Furthermore, Yasuo sensed numerous other golden cylinders, one inside the other, similar to Matryoshka dolls, a set of wooden dolls of decreasing size placed one inside another. Most are beneath the earth and each has a different inky body part, horrendously disgusting massive body parts, each cylinder sealing one inside. In the dark center of the cylinders, in the smallest cylinder sat a human being, or at least the remnants of a human being. Even after his death, his body still stood the test of time. He seems to have been dead for thousands of years, yet there is still flesh on the body where there should only be bones, corroded bones. He was sitting in a meditative position for ages, seemingly not interested in the world knowing of his heroic deeds, of how he saved the world. And Yasuo wasn't interested in letting the world know of the man's sacrifice. And this isn't the first Yasuo visited the place. He did come here to get Dawn Freaks' bloodline as well as the Dark Creature's bloodline. The Dark Creature's bloodline was simply no match for Yasuo, even though if placed within the bloodstream of any other person, that person would simply be consumed and become but a dead moving person, the same as the ones in the underground town. Yasuo lifted his hand, from which a small light ball manifested, the embodiment of fortune and misfortune. He released it directly within the central point of the whole cylinder formation. Then he reappeared a few miles away from the area. The white sphere was tens of times stronger than his last one as he continued to compress and feed that white sphere until it became what it is today. A bright light shone upon the world, instantly spreading throughout miles around the area only to disappear a split second later. It vanished as far as it appeared, not allowing anyone to notice its existence, and its effect was instantaneous and precise. It did exactly what Yasuo wanted it to do, simply erasing everything within the area and erasing everything relative to them at this point in time. Because at that point in time, that same light appeared within the underground town and the Crimson Land, erasing them completely. Yasuo then appeared in the vastness of space, looking down on the colossal planet with his eyes gleaming, unable to hide his anticipation. Then several things started appearing in miles around him, everything he prepared for this day solely. Numerous destructive weapons and planet-annihilating poisons and solutions, nuclear weapons were numerous among them. They were even more dangerous weapons that if released upon the world would represent its demises. This is the result of all of his research for the last phase solely, so many unimaginable deadly things that brought chill upon every creature in the world. At that point in time, everyone and everything looked at the dark sky, some opened their windows and looked outside, and some creatures left their nests curious about what made them feel that way. They felt that chill for a split second and felt the incoming death for the few seconds to come, as if their entire existence is solely dependent upon the thoughts of something else. And perhaps, that thing is contemplating whether to erase the world or not, an illusionary feeling even the one slumbering felt. However, they saw nothing in the sky, but they know what they felt, and what they feel is real because everyone around them seemed to have felt the same. And as time went on, that sense of crisis only continued to elevate, forcing everything to hold their breath and hide back in their nests. The point in time they felt chills is the moment Yasuo activated a special ability of his for the second time, his debt collector ability. That ability happened to have an even more special side. he can mostly collect debts only from the willing, the ones that had accepted his whispers. But once a month, he can forcefully get a debt from anything depending on how much power he has upon that thing. The amount of power he can borrow depends on how much power he has over the target's life, and his target now is the world itself, the core of the world, epithymias. He has been spreading his little pets called zombie organisms throughout the creature for years, and now, nearly all of the creature is painted in his purple color. Once he activates those organisms, once they wake up from their slumber, they will start to dearly consume epithymias whole, leaving a dead dry body with little to no energy. The weapons around him will then be used to erase the whole body, with the world being destroyed with it. Just to make sure, Yasuo prepared few other things. A white sphere suddenly appeared before him, the embodiment of fortune and misfortune. This one, however, was different from the other one, a diameter of 20 meters, on a completely different level from the other one, akin to the difference between heaven and earth. He had put a lot more effort into creating this one. The amount of energy compressed within the white sphere seems to be able to erase the world whole, but epithymias is a special case. Numerous other spheres appeared all around him, all representing different embodiments of his, all with different colors and functionality, but all able to erase worlds. If the unimaginable amounts of energy epithymias have remained within, then Yasuo knows he can't have as much power over it as he wants, and he will barely be able to borrow 10% of its power. That's why the zombie organisms are needed. They will devour that curtain, the shield of epithymias whole, leaving it defenseless. Yasuo closed his crimson eyes and activated his ability. Time froze for a moment, then returned to its normal flow, only to freeze again. This time, not only did the world freeze, but the whole solar system seemed to freeze as Yasuo went further and collected every debt he has ever collected, including epithymias's. A waterfall the size of the universe gushed out through Yasuo's soul and body as epithymias's unimaginable power rushed through him, 80% of its power in fact. The unimaginable amount of power seems to be able to burst through planets, as even the strongest and most miraculous of materials won't be able to hold it. The blackest of black holes will be distorted and crushed under that indescribable power, yet his body was able to hold it tightly inside, seemingly holding an improbable hungry abyss within. However, isn't that kind of useless? No matter how much power one has, if it can only last for 10 seconds, then what's its use? Granted, for the current Yasuo, 10 seconds can be considered an eternity for the sheer amount of pressure he's applying on the whole world, and time itself forces the latter to move like a snail where it moves normally for everyone else. That, however, doesn't matter to Yasuo, as a satisfied smile surfaced on his face and uttered those chilling words, "Reality domain." Then instantly, his new massive domain, which has a range of several solar systems all around, started to compress upon itself until it only enveloped him solely. Then he simply became to control reality around him and changing it, with the only limit being his aura pool, which is insane, to say the least, and his input capacity. Just how simple can the steps to omnipotence be? Just changing the rule of my ability, changing those 10 seconds limit to eternity, and I will never lose the power I just gained. Yasuo was thoroughly amused by how easily he achieved his current state. His domain can now sense reality and he naturally can control it. So all he did is changing the rules so that he can have this power forever. His goal was achieved so simply and comfortably. That was, however, only the beginning, as he closed his eyes and started comprehending and getting used to his current state. Yet he only closed his eyes for a minute before he was done. He trained for years in a future that didn't happen. His vision eye is truly broken. The rest of the minute he used to get used to the astonishing amount of information he's receiving through his domain as he spread it, enveloping the whole solar system. And he continued to do so until it reached its maximum range. His evolved inhuman brain allowed for that to be possible. In the next moment, a small jelly matter appeared before Yasuo, quietly floating within reach, Epithymias's bloodline, if it can even be considered blood. He then devoured it, forcing his genes to work even harder than they already are. After all, even though he can handle the new increase in strength, it still feels a bit uncomfortable. So he again compressed his domain around him and accelerated time to an astonishing degree, seeking to fully complete his new evolution before stopping his time domain. An hour passed, but hundreds of years have passed within his cocoon. That's how much it took for the evolution to finish. There was no apparent change in Yasuo, but only he knows how much he has changed from the inside. He sensed the almost dry body of epithymias with his domain, and he appeared in the core of the planet in the next moment. He lifted his hand and touched the epithymias' dry body, and only a second passed before it turned to dust as Yasuo devoured its remaining power. Then he closed his eyes and looked back into the past, into the formation of the very solar system he's in, and into the death of epithymias, searching for the answers to all of his questions and doubts. He opened his eyes a second later with amusement and expectations apparent in them. Fate, huh? That sounds too interesting, something that will take a long time to research. I'm looking forward to it. Perhaps I can even borrow its power? For eternity. Yasuo calmly remarked as numerous things to research are already running through his mind. Research, huh? And that's a wrap, hunters. Another amazing Hunter x Hunter fanfic done and stored. Like usual, show the author some love. Their info is below. If you're new here and vibing with the channel, like, drop a comment, even if it's just screaming Killua supremacy as any normal person should, and hit subscribe to officially join the cult, community. Yay. The Hunter community, eyes emoji. Your support helps a lot. Just you watching and liking the video, comments, it helps keep me motivated too. So yay. What else did I have to say? Oh, and also keep an eye on the community posts. We aren't bots and actually post cool stuff there daily. But don't quote me on that. If Terry's nothing there for a day, or a few days, I choose to dodge all responsibility. That's it for now. Peace. And love y'all. Headphone emoji, red heart emoji.